Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. Sorry, I started a little bit late this morning. I've been trying to get the audio and everything else straight. I am having a fit with trying to get all of this to work properly, and I've been up most of the night trying to do so. I hope the sound's okay and that you can hear me okay. I did the video yesterday and could barely hear myself in the entire video, and I could barely hear my guests. So I have tweaked the volume settings on this, and I hope this works the way it's supposed to work. How you guys doing this morning? Doing all right? It's like, who's watching BRICS? Yeah, you were watching BRICS. No action. Good morning. No echo. Well, that's good. That is what I've been working for. Can you hear me okay? Is the volume loud enough? That's also the other issue. I'm in my suit again. I am determined to get a video straight, with my first video being in my suit. Excellent, excellent, excellent. I hope you guys are doing okay this morning. Of course, my name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Show. I am the voice that is doing it to you in your ear hole from the 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. I have a fantastic show for you today. Elijah Magnier is going to be here talking about the latest in the conflict in regards to Israel's genocide. We're going to also have Dan Kovalik. He is going to be talking with us about, I believe it's about the leaks. So, there were these massive intel leaks that have been basically roiling DC. And it's believed that they may have a person who they suspect of being the culprit in doing it. So, is she a hero? Is she a criminal? Is she something else? I mean, after all, you take somewhat of a moral action in order to prevent a war. But we don't know her reason and rationale. We just know that information was leaked. So, is what it is. We're going to have a conversation with Dan Kovalik. We also have Shoban Saxena. Shoban is a friend of the show. I've known him for a few years, and he covers Indian and Brazilian politics and consider the BRICS summit that's taking place right now in Kazan. I thought it was a good thing to have somebody to be able to explain that summit, especially from the context of the country to which he is in. And of course, we have the one and only Michael Tracy. I am looking forward to this, to have a conversation with Michael Tracy. Michael Tracy is a fascinating guy. He has no allegiances to pretty much anybody. He pisses everybody off because he's willing to ask questions that many people don't necessarily ask, and he doesn't necessarily affiliate himself with either party, which is the reason why I like him. I disagree with him on the RFK stuff, so we're going to ideally get into that also. So that should be super interesting. No, we're going to have a really good show for you today. A key issue, and one of the interesting things, what time is it? It is good. We have time. All right. So the Democratic Party has gotten more, what's the word I'm looking for? Aggressive in going after Trump as a criminal. Joe Biden went out the other day, said Trump needs to be locked up. One of the most interesting dynamics, though, has to do with the Arab vote. Now, I have said before that under no circumstances should a political party get a pat on the back for allowing a genocide. Meaning, if you have power and you are in a position where you're giving money, weapons, guns, you're giving everything to this group. You're giving political support, you're giving political cover, you're trying to get countries that are in the United Nations or the United Nations Security Council in order to go your way. You are claiming that the UN Security Council resolution for a ceasefire is just not a real thing. It's just provisionary, that it doesn't necessarily have the force of law. Okay, well, I'm going to say that you're culpable. If there was any situation in the U.S., if you got pulled over by cops, and cops find out that you gave them the money, you gave them the guns, you knew what they were going to do with the money and the guns, you are going to jail. And you're going to jail for a long time because you are going to be culpable. So my point of view is, if Biden is in the White House, Biden is doing all of these things, then Biden can't say, I don't have anything to do with this situation. Oh, Israel is an independent actor. He can do what it wants. No. The reality of it is, when it is bombing kids, when it is blowing up buildings, for example, just give an example. Broad daylight, Beirut, Israel goes and levels a building. All right, clip number 9. Broad daylight. Just think about that. Just think about that. Now, the reason was, well, there was a Hamas center that was there. Now, the reality of it is, they consider everybody to be terrorists. I mean, keep in mind, the argument that they made when they went into Lebanon was, well, all of these houses have missiles in the garages, or they have some kind of munitions in their trash cans, and so everybody is fair game. This was pretty much the same argument they were using to basically decimate and kill everything in Gaza right now. In fact, they're even talking about having settlers take over parts of northern Gaza. Now, again, I don't want to pat myself on the back for being right, but all the way through this, I was right. I kept saying this is a land grab. He wants to create his greater Israel and is using that as a pretext to do it. And I am very doubtful that Joe Biden is even entirely against this. At the very least, look, I don't think necessarily that the United States want to wider war when it's already in a war in Ukraine, so there's that. But the reporting has been contradictory, with elements of the White House being perfectly okay with them going after Hezbollah or going, for the most part, into northern Lebanon. From my point of view, it doesn't matter if you feel against it. What matters is what you do. Do you have the power to do something about it, yeah or nay? And if the answer is yes, and not just power to do something about it, if you're enabling, which is exactly what the U.S. is doing, then you should not get a pat on the back and you should not be co-signed for genocide. Meaning, however a person gets elected, it should be a low bar to say, if you killed 30,000 children, you're not getting my vote. Full stop. Genocide should be a red line. And for all of this argument that, well, Donald Trump is worse, Donald Trump is worse, Donald Trump is going to do the exact same thing, that is hypothetical. What I know is that Joe Biden is in office right now, and Joe Biden is allowing all of that stuff, and Kamala Harris, according to her, is not going to do anything different. It is the Biden administration that is allowing this genocide to take place. What happens with Trump is conceptual. There's also something to be said for drawing a red line that this is a no. Meaning this is not something from the standpoint of standards that we will allow. And you will lose, full stop, if you are going to go down this particular path of being willing to support a genocide. What's super interesting is the way the Arab community is looking at this. Donald Trump has been able to get a bit of a pop with the Arab community. In recent polling, I believe this was by YouGov, of Arab Americans, 45%. Let me get the exact number. So right here, Arab News, YouGov poll, Trump, 45%, Harris, 43%, Chilstein, 4%. Think about that, 43%. In one of the other polls, they asked, who do you think is better to deal with the issue between Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah? In that poll, Donald Trump got 60 to Harris's 30. I'm sorry, Trump got 48 to Harris's 30. So despite the fact that Donald Trump is saying, yes, give Netanyahu all the money, weapons, guns, and everything else, let him do whatever he wants, and Harris is being mealy-mouthed in her answers. Oh, October 7th, and the Palestinian plight is so bad, but October 7th, etc. The Arab community is siding a particular way. And I think I know why, especially from the standpoint of the American public and why the American public sees Trump as better on this issue. It's not that I think that the American public believes that Trump or Netanyahu is right. In fact, the polling I've seen is that if Kamala Harris took a stance against what is taking place, that she would be better off, especially from the standpoint of various communities, because the American public in general thinks Israel has gone too far. No, I think it's clarity. I think the issue is clarity. When Donald Trump comes out, he is very clear in his position. Let Netanyahu do whatever he wants. That's egregious. It is deranged. But it's clear. It's coherent. It's a very straightforward policy. as opposed to having this mealy mouth argument where you are allowing a particular policy to take place, but you are not necessarily entirely clear in your articulation of what you actually want to do. Ergo, when the American public looks at it, when they see it, their point of view is, well, that guy is clear, this other person is not. Donald Trump has started to lean into this, by the way, and recently in a rally, I think this was yesterday actually, he was at the political rally, he goes into, let me see, which clip is it? It is clip number, right. Clip number 11. Yes, I have a ton of clips. Initially, I used to have an engineer that used to do this stuff. All right, clip number 11. This is Donald Trump at a rally going after Harris, using Liz Cheney as a battering ram to beat the stuffing out of Harris.
You ask yourself, why would Muslims support Harris when she embraces Muslim-hating and very dumb person, Liz Cheney, a dumb person, who, by the way, lost for Congress in the biggest margin in the history of politics. She lost by almost 40 points. The reason she has that honor is that most people wouldn't have stayed in. A congressperson that's in that position normally retires before the election, which would have been a good idea for her to do. But Liz Cheney's a total loser. But her father brought years of war and death to the Middle East. He killed many Arabs, many Arabs and Muslims. And now Lion Kamala has embraced Liz Cheney. She embraced her. And why would a Muslim or why would an Arab want to vote for somebody that has Liz Cheney as her hero? Liz Cheney is a totally failed politician. Again, she set the worst record. I think it's a terrible mistake that she's made. I think it's a great insult to Muslims all over the world, and I think that she's going to do very bad in Michigan.
Yeah, I would say he has a point. By the same token, it is Netanyahu that is killing them now, and it is Donald Trump who is backing Netanyahu. It is a weird place to be in. But he's not wrong. The idea that Harris is running around with Liz Cheney, as Liz Cheney is somehow the stalwart of democracy, the person who backs her dad, of course, and who her dad was instrumental in 9/11, which went with this notion of reorganizing the Muslim and the Middle East, getting 1,000 or 1,000,000, Iraqis killed. Yeah, it's a weird phenomena in the sense of her choosing Liz Cheney and running around with the Cheney as her, going to multiple states showing, hey, I have this warmongering Republican with me. Are you not entertained and happy? You don't want to vote for this? Good luck with that. I would say, though, that Harris would do herself, or would have done herself, a favor by picking a side, by choosing, by being clear, coherent in regards to what you want to do in regards to policy. If you think that Israel has gone too far, call for an arms embargo. If you don't think they've gone too far, then say so. But you can't have it both ways. The choice is going to be a yes or no. There is not a maybe in the context of what you're going to do in regards to your policy. I think the American public sees that. And in looking at the two, Trump's coherent, as deranged, and as disgusting as his policy is, it's clear and coherent. The other one, not so much. Look, let's take a quick break. And by the way, the Muslim community has nowhere to run to in this particular race. The reality of it is, there's something to be said in a race for things that go beyond the very specific race that you're in. And one of those things is there should be a red line, bright, clear, and thick, drawn under this notion of a standard that we will not accept this genocide, and damn sure not in our name, nor will you get a vote of support for doing so. You will not be rewarded for supporting a genocide and screaming Trump. You can do it all you want. It's not going to change the fact that you are in that office. You are making those decisions, and you are allowing this to take place. Let's take a break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment.
Hi, I can hear you very well.
All right. Welcome back. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. And I have a fantastic guest with me today. If I can get this straight, give me 1 second, guys. And there we are. There we are. I have a fantastic guest with me today. I am greatly appreciative that he could join me. The one and only Elijah Magnier. He's a veteran war correspondent with 35 years experience in Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Libya, Sudan, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia. Elijah, welcome, man. Thank you for joining me. You're the first person I thought of based on the story that I was going with yesterday. How are you doing this morning?
I'm fine, thank you. Great to be with you.
Excellent. Now, let me check with the audience to make sure they can hear you okay. I had a bit of sound difficulties yesterday that was inhibiting their ability to hear me properly. So, I'm going to ask the audience real quick. Can you guys hear Elijah okay? Is he loud enough for you all? Come on, come on. Good, okay. So they said they can hear you just fine. So I am going to go into the show. Elijah, man, I've been fascinated by the recent events that have been taking place, horrified in many respects, especially in regards to Israel's behavior. I mean, we've talked about it a few times before. Right now, there is this, I guess, weight, this expectation that an attack is going to take place. It feels weird because it feels like we're just waiting on some level for potentially the world to come to some extreme end. I find it very bizarre because the thought is that Israel is going to do a strike. Now, Israel has found itself to be vulnerable. It has been getting hit by Hezbollah. It has found itself to be lacking in regards to the land battle, meaning they've been taking casualties in a war of attrition in southern Lebanon. They know that Iranian missiles can hit Israel, pretty much any point in Israel, and yet they're planning a retaliatory strike, which is going to be hit by a massive retaliatory strike by Iran. What are they thinking on this? Because I have to be honest, it is very bizarre to me, and I can't necessarily get my head around what they are planning, knowing full well what Iran's response is going to be. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Israel is not on its own. There is the other forces that's supporting the Israelis, like the US, UK, NATO standing by Israel. There were more than 6,000 flights in the last year, by only 20% by the Israelis and 80% by the Americans, the British, the German, and other NATO members, supporting Israel against non-state actors like Hamas and Hezbollah. Therefore, for the Israelis to go to war against Iran, it is not on its own, as Israel has not been on its own with the war against Hamas and Hezbollah, even if these are small non-state actors in comparison to what Israel military apparatus is, including the superpower as the US, UK, and other NATO countries. This is why the Israelis can dare to go and attack Iran, in particular when Iran showed how it was able to overwhelm the Israeli defense system and the interception missile system that received a real hit when Iran launched over 200 hypersonic ballistic missiles against Israel. Now, there is another factor, is that Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't want to look weak. This is why he wants to hit Iran, even if at this point they're both even. Israel had destroyed the embassy, the consulate in Damascus. Iran retaliated. Israel killed Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas leader, in the heart of the Iranian capital, and Iran retaliated. So they are even. But now Israel wants to hit Iran again. And at the end of the day, it will not be very bad for the war to see Iran retaliating to the Israeli hit if Iran retaliates in strength, to make sure that the wider the war becomes, the more urgent become to.
Oh, there's a freeze. Elijah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Oh,
you.
there you are. Okay. I'm just making sure. Um, okay. But that still means that Israel is going to take a hit. Meaning that still means that built into the calculus of it all is they are going to get hit. I mean, there was a when they made this point of saying it was going to be a surprising attack. The attack is going to be unexpected. Do you think they're talking about assassinations? Like the objective is to kill Ayatollah, for example, or to kill certain leaders in Iran. Do you think that that's what they're looking at? I had Ritter on yesterday, and he was talking about the intel leak and the type of attack that is expected in the context of that leak. And he pointed out, he says, look, this could be an assassination run where they're trying to kill the Ayatollah, or this is a provocation for nukes. This notion that Israel attacks, Iran gives an overwhelming response, and then Israel comes up with a justification to basically utilize the nuclear program. And again, the nuclear program was something that they even talked about in the leaks. What do you think about either of those two as a potential objective of Israel?
Well, there's nothing is considered surprising anymore, because there is more than 1,000 miles between Israel and Iran. Therefore, we're talking about a long distance for the jets to depart from Israel. They will be seen because they will have to cross Jordan and then again cross Iraq, and then have a refueling in the air, and that will take some time, and then attack Iran. By that time, Iran is warned because it has satellites and warning system that allows it to understand that is an attack that is coming in its way. If Israel wants to use Ballistic missiles, again, this will require between 7 to 10 minutes, and the warning will be received. And this is why the assassination of leaders from a distance or from the jets or bombing their location, it is not guaranteed. So hitting the hitting nuclear site is almost impossible because the objective is to set back Iran or to destroy its capability. There are more than a dozen nuclear sites that wouldn't be in need to be destroyed, and that requires more than 100 Israeli jet and American, if the Americans want to participate. And the logistic is huge without any guarantee that a nuclear site like Fordo, for example, in the mountain.
Wait, real quick, Elijah. Just I hate to interrupt. I'm sorry. What I meant by that was Israel has nukes themselves, and if they get into a situation where Iran strikes, is it possible that an Israeli strike is being done in order to create a context where they can utilize their nuclear weapons, where they can say, "Well, we got hit, and because we got hit now, we can use nukes because of the scale of the Iranian attack." Do you think that is a potential?
No, because the Iranian attack aimed against military bases and not to cause um, human casualties. The aim was to send a strong message. And we have seen Russia with more than 5,000 plus nuclear head did not use any of its nuclear capabilities. Therefore, setting an unprecedented act of using nuclear weapons against a country, it is something that I don't think the Americans will allow that to happen. And the Israelis would like to see this happening because, again, it will not destroy Iran. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki caused more than 200,000 plus people who were killed, but did not destroy Japan. And hitting Iran on a site, Iran will go immediately to develop its nuclear capability, and as soon as the nuclear bomb is ready, they will launch it against Israel. And we're talking about the curse of the geography. Israel is 22,000 square kilometers, and Iran is 1,640,000 square kilometers.
Wow. Yeah, it was wild to me. I mean, the entire thing is wild to me. Israel clearly is vulnerable in this, and my thought was, with all the support of America, you're still getting hit. It's like America can't protect you in this. One of the things that took place, so Israel handed over to the United States a document of, quote, principles for an arrangement to end the war with Hezbollah. The Prime Minister's office apparently forwarded the document to the White House ahead of the visit of who I call IDF soldier, um, dual citizen, Israeli citizen, U.S. citizen, and President Joe Biden's envoy, Amos Hochstein. He's in Beirut. Israel demanded that the IDF be allowed to carry out, quote, active enforcement, unquote, in Lebanese territory to ensure Hezbollah does not rebuild military infrastructure near the border. I call this a bill of surrender. Um, and I guess my first question is, who is this bill of surrender to? Meaning, is this going to Hezbollah? Is this intended for the Lebanese government? Is it intended for both? I didn't quite understand who they were supposed to be negotiating with. Could you go into this for me and explain how this is supposed to work?
Well, the U.S. envoy Amos Hochstein negotiated with the speaker, Nabih Berri, and he's talking to the one of the pillar of the Lebanese government. And basically what he is asking is a legal violation of the Lebanese sovereignty, which is something that no country would accept unless the country is totally defeated and under the mercy of the winner. And we don't have a winner now. We don't have a winner in Gaza. The Palestinian resistance did not raise the white flag. And we have seen the Israelis going in and out of all parts of Gaza numerous times, not being able to defeat the resistance. So how the Americans can come up with a surrender documents imposing the Israeli overwhelming will over Lebanon, dictating the terms when Israel is failing to advance in the south of Lebanon and did not occupy the 500 square kilometers that it claimed it will occupy in the first stage.
There we are. I'm sorry, my volume was muted. I don't know how they plan on doing that. And I guess one of the other questions is the expectation that Lebanon uses its military to go after Hezbollah if they sign that deal? Meaning, if the government of Lebanon says, yes, we would do this. Because the reality of it is, it doesn't necessarily seem like the government of Lebanon is engaged in any sort of war. This is Hezbollah. So if they agreed to that sort of deal of, yes, we will allow a violation of Lebanese territory, well, that doesn't really stop the war. I mean, Israel continues to fight and prosecute its war with Hezbollah in that situation. So I don't necessarily understand how that can be a negotiation with the government of Lebanon as opposed to Hezbollah, who they are in conflict with. Am I misunderstanding this?
Well, first of all, let us make clear a few points. Hezbollah represent almost a third of the population. Therefore, it is not an outside force that can be removed. Secondly, Hezbollah is present in the parliament and the government. Therefore, it is part of the institution and the army. Third, the Lebanese government agreed in its ministerial statement when it took oath that those in charge of defending the country are the army, the people, and the resistance. And Hezbollah for the Lebanese government is considered a resistance force because Israel continue occupying land in the south of Lebanon. Therefore, Israel refused to withdraw from the Lebanese territory that is occupied according to 1701 United Nations Security Council resolution. This is where the Israelis and the Americans, when they asked the Lebanese army to make sure that they push away Hezbollah from the south of Lebanon, it is inviting the Israeli army to be engaged in a civil war and to be divided, because the Israeli army will never start attacking the inhabitant of the south of Lebanon, because Hezbollah represent a big part of the who are fighting Israel today. They live there. They defend their homes. How the Israeli army is going to invite them to leave, to offer them another land? What if they don't want to be internally displaced in their own country? The army is also made of people who belong to the same society of Hezbollah. Then the army will be split in different pieces, and then Lebanon will lose its army. And my last point is, the Lebanese army has been supplied with light weapons for civil war and not for deterrence weapon against any country that violates its sovereignty. Therefore, the Lebanese army cannot defend Lebanon from the Israeli violation of its airspace or water or even ground territory. This is why the Lebanese army was not given enough missiles or weapons or anti-air missiles to stop the Israeli violation of Lebanon's sovereignty. And this is why the Lebanese government went to the United Nations and presented 30,000 demand accusing Israel of violating its sovereignty in the last 18 years.
I want to get your take on something that Matthew Miller said after Yahya Sinwar's killing. Of course, the video was shown with, I mean, any way you look at it, heroic terms, right? The man is injured, he's wounded, he's sitting in a chair, and he, with his last bit of strength, throws a stick at one of the drones just before he was ultimately killed. So, of course, Matthew Miller, representing the United States, one of the worst people on the planet from my point of view, he comes out and says the following. I hope you can hear this. I hope this is loud enough. I'm going to play this clip number 5.
Refuse to return home the hostages who have been separated from their families for more than a year. Refuse to agree to a ceasefire proposal endorsed by the United Nations Security Council and countries around the world, and who in recent weeks refused to even negotiate at all on a ceasefire and an end to the war. There are 101 hostages who remain in Gaza, including 7 Americans. And of course, there are 2 million Palestinians who continue to suffer the consequences of Sinwar's decision to endanger their lives. The path that Sinwar wanted for the region, death, destruction, instability, chaos, is a path that we know the people of the region reject. The horrors of the past year cannot be the future, and they do not need to be the future.
I'm rather astonished. Like, I guess I can't say I'm astonished by that statement, but give me a take on that. I mean, the reality of it is, Sinwar is going to be seen in these kind of heroic terms by the people who are part of this resistance. He is claiming that they were resisting a deal, that this is entirely their fault or Hamas's fault, that everything started on October 7th. Give me a take on Miller's comments there.
Well, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres responded to that, and he said this conflict started 50 years ago. So I don't need to analyze more than the highest authority in the world, in theory, saying how this conflict started, which is not on the 7th of October. Secondly, what Matthew Miller is saying reflects the US policy that considered Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, as a friend and an ally, as John Kirby said, when Benjamin Netanyahu is accused by the highest court of justice, the International Criminal Court, of being a war criminal. Him and his defense minister, Yoav Gallant. These are the values of the United States defending war criminals. And then my last point is this video that was shared by the Israelis represent exactly the entire Palestinian conflict. You see a man wounded, not able to fight, but he took a small piece of wood next to him, what he managed to grab next to him, throwing it against a drone, an advanced technology that the Israelis are using, and throwing it at the drone without necessarily hitting it, but continuing to resist and defying the drone. And then the Israeli responded by bombing the place with their tank, the most formidable Merkava 4 tank that exists in the world. And it shows how the Palestinians are caught in a small corner, in a small flat, where they are wounded, and they grab what they can from the floor or next to them, and they retaliate and they respond and they try to hit the Israelis. That is a formidable army, very modern, and has all the capability, and not even really affecting the Israelis. But because the Israelis have such a strong narrative and media on their support, they show themselves the victims because they've been hit by a piece of wood. And this piece of wood is unacceptable, and therefore Israel has a right to defend itself and hit with its tank, with all might force, against one individual that was shown on the drone that doesn't have the capability to stand on his feet. It is really the full picture. It is the full picture of 78 years of struggle between an almighty force supported by a superpower and a modern army against indigenous population who just want to defend themselves and try to resist with whatever they have against this army and this occupier. And yet they are called the aggressor, and the occupier is called with the right to defend itself.
You know, I'm curious about something. Israel has been in this war for the last year. Basically, they found themselves in a war of attrition. They are bogged down in Lebanon. They are getting hit by Hezbollah left and right. And look, let's not get it twisted, right? They have the ability to kill a lot of people Fair enough. They can do that. But they don't seem to have the ability to win under the guise that they want to win. They're still fighting and bogged down in Gaza. They're held up in Lebanon while accepting casualties. And now they are pivoting to hit Iran. This is in the context of an economy that is falling apart with a huge number of people that have gone back to their homelands. And yet, they seem to think they're winning. I guess the question is, are they winning? Or is this a little bit more complicated than just their ability to kill a lot of people? Give me a take on this, because it's triumphalism. We're going to go after Iran now. Okay, now you're expanding the war further. And again, killing Sinwar, killing Nasrallah, from their point of view, we can do this, we can keep going. Do you think Israel is winning in this struggle so far?
2 points here. First, Israel is not on its own. Israel has 2,000 Delta forces in Tel Aviv, has the full fleet supporting it in the Mediterranean and the Red Sea, has the British supporting it to intercept missiles and drones. The Americans supplied Israel with 50,000 tons of ammunition, according to what the Americans are telling us. They have created a bridge, 1,900 air bridge shipment of weapons between the Americans, the German, and the British. So Israel is not fighting on its own. Secondly, the objective of Hamas and Hezbollah, both non-state actors, is not to win, but to prevent Israel from winning. And it's not to lose. And this is why they will fight to the end. Can Israel fight to the end? Of course not, because Israel is not the owner of the land. They don't owe south of Lebanon. They don't owe Gaza. They don't owe the West Bank. They have taken this land in 1948 from the Palestinians, and it was a small, tiny bit of 364 square kilometers of Gaza remained there, is made of more than 60 refugee camps from all. These people don't refuse to die. And what the Israelis have won so far is to destroy the infrastructure in Gaza and to kill what President Joe Biden said, too many civilians have been killed. This is what the Americans are telling us, but they're not doing anything about it. Is that a victory? Military speaking, this is not a victory. The victory is when there are clear objectives and these are achieved. And the clear objective of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is to defeat the resistance and to free the prisoners. No prisoner has been released or freed, at the exception of a very few, and Hamas did not raise the white flag. So these objectives have not been met, therefore there's no victory.
See, I would argue that the murder is the point. The indiscriminate killing is the point. That from the very beginning, my point was they were trying to, this was a land grab. They want to take Gaza, they want to take parts of Syria, they want to take parts of northern Lebanon, or southern Lebanon, and the indiscriminate killing is the way to accomplish it. And part of the reason I say that is the surrender document. Basically, we will continue to terrorize this country. We're going to kill as many people as we want. We're going to slaughter women and children if you do not surrender and allow us to take southern Lebanon. And right now, there are apparently people who are trying to move in and resettle Gaza, at the very least northern Gaza. That seems to be the plan. In fact, Anthony Blinken apparently went to Israel. This was, I believe, in the New York Times or Washington Post. I think it's Washington Post. And Blinken told him, there's a perception that you are trying to starve people in the north so you can take the land in the north. Basically, anybody who's staying here is going to starve or die, with this notion of taking it. Netanyahu said, that's not my objective. And when pushed to go out and say that that wasn't his objective, Netanyahu said no. It seems to be a clear objective that this is a land grab and what they're trying to accomplish, meaning the military objective that they're saying kill Hamas in Hezbollah has more to do with we want to occupy the lands that these resistant groups are defending. That is our objective. When we can take this territory, we're going to take this territory, and that is what we consider to be a success. Give me a take on that. And I guess the other question is that even possible at this point?
It is not possible because the Israeli army entered the different part of Gaza, and then was forced to pull out. Therefore, the occupation forces are not managing to have a static position, at the exception of the Nitzane corridor that divide the north from the south, and the Philadelphia corridor with a border with Egypt. And this is why every time they go to an area, they destroy and they pull out. Secondly, in the south of Lebanon, there have been 4 weeks now of fighting, and the Israeli army advanced for 1.5 kilometers only. So we're talking about a mile when there are 5 divisions, around 80,000 men deployed along the borders. And they want to occupy 5 kilometers of width and 100 in length. That is 500 square kilometers, 1.5 times bigger than Gaza. If they fail to occupy Gaza, how are they going to occupy this part of the south of Lebanon? And Gaza is an open air concentration camp, while south of Lebanon, where there is Hezbollah, is a more powerful non-state actor. It has the supply line that is open. Therefore, the Israeli objectives cannot be met by military force.
What do you think the end goal is to all of this? Because you're right, everything you've articulated is entirely true. I would even go so far as to say that Israel has went in trying to use this as their 9/11 moment, has created somewhat of an existential crisis for itself. I mean, like I said, the economy is in tatters. You have a huge number of people that have left the country in its entirety. Many of the Palestinians that were in the workforce have been killed, or for that matter, under bombardment. And they are, forefront conflict? And they're about to add another front to that conflict. What is the ultimate? How do you think this ends? Meaning, I don't believe you can go back to anything that looks like October 7th. And if you don't go back to this kind of typical open-air ghetto, etc., then what does this look like when it all comes to an end? Give me your prediction on this.
I think Israel will not win this war. And it is the Israeli prime minister who is really holding on to his seat. And it's not about Israel existential threat that is facing. On the contrary, it is Israel that has destroyed Gaza completely, destroyed hospital, water, electricity, any sewage infrastructure, schools, universities, churches and mosques. They've destroyed homes. They blew up all the houses. They changed the geography of Gaza, but they did not win over the heart and mind of the population. On the contrary, they've created more hate among the people of Gaza toward the Israelis. And in the south of Lebanon, they've destroyed part of south of Lebanon. They are destroying the suburb of Beirut. They've destroyed the Bekaa Valley. People will want to revenge. They will want to stand against them. They would want to support Hezbollah that is fighting them. And again, Israel will fail. It's a deja vu. We've seen it before in 1982, and when Hezbollah was not even born yet. And because of the Israeli invasion, Hezbollah was born, and it managed with a small group to kick out the Israelis from most of the Lebanese territory after 18 years. And now this force had become more formidable and stronger, more decisive to fight the Israelis and to hold this ground. So no, the Israelis thought that they have destroyed Hezbollah, but they made a mistake. They thought they've destroyed Hamas by killing their families, but they did not end the resistance of the militant. And by killing the family, you inflict pain, but you also create more will of revenge. This is what the Israelis have been creating in Palestine and in Lebanon. So they cannot win because they're fighting the resistance.
Elijah, one last
And
question.
then we surrender because...
No, please finish. No, please continue. There was a slight pause. There was a slight delay. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, so it is just like we say in Europe, the Nazis have won the war and we have to surrender. The people did not surrender to the Nazis. They fought them. They stood against them and they kicked them out and they won the battle. But there were dozens of millions of people who were killed. There are sacrifices, but but the invaders cannot win.
One last point before I let you go. Israel claimed that Hezbollah had a bunch of gold, money, in some kind of bunker that was under a hospital. The BBC ends up going to that hospital, and even the BBC was incredulous, didn't find anything there. They were opening everything, including medical waste, body bags, corpse, etc. They couldn't find anything there. This was once again somewhat Israel lied. They also are attacking the financial district and claiming that it is a hub of activity for Hezbollah. Well, what's going on with this? I mean, I think this is wild, right? Like Hezbollah, like as you pointed out, would make up like a third of the government. They are a political party in Lebanon. So there will be an expectation that there will be all sorts of industries or all sorts of things that they may have their hands in. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is pushed, powered by, or for that matter, funding Hezbollah. But give me your take on this. They are claiming that the reason they're blowing up the financial district, or for that matter, attacking hospitals, is because there are ubiquitous Hezbollah, either bunkers, either money, or something involved in all of these places in Beirut. What's the truth behind this?
2 points. Hezbollah receives from Iran between $50 to $70 million every single month, and they hardly enough to pay the salary and to cover all the civilian work that Hezbollah offers to the population. Therefore, there are no storage of money left for Hezbollah to pile up. Is hardly enough for Hezbollah to survive and the society, because the Lebanese government is not really responding to the need of the population, in particular in a deprived area, but not only where the Shia live, but also where the Sunni, in particular in Akkar in the north and in the Bekaa Valley. So there is no base for the Lebanese government to be fair with all the population, and the Lebanese government doesn't have the money. This is why Hezbollah is involved in a social welfare. But it's still not enough, because there are roads that are not really suitable for cars, that are wells that need to be created in different villages in the south of Lebanon. There are so many other projects that are still in the pipeline because there isn't enough money. Secondly, the Al-Qadr Hassan institution that Israel bombed is an institution that made only for the people. This is where people go and put their money to not to take interest, but to make sure that they can allow other poor people to come and lend between $0 to $5,000 maximum, and municipalities up to $35,000. And the way it worked is either someone with enough money would go and put a deposit to guarantee other poor people to come and take a small loan for their businesses or solar system, etc., or people go and put their gold as a guarantee, and then they take a loan, for a small loan for 1 or 3 years, and they reimburse it. There is no money that Hezbollah invests there, but Hezbollah is a guarantor in case someone doesn't pay the money, and this is where Hezbollah interferes. So it's the one who injects money to cover what other people fail to meet their mortgage. But it is a hit on the civilian institution to make sure that Hezbollah's cost of reconstruction will be higher.
I see. Oh, man, I've never seen anything like it, to be honest. And the notion that this government, my government, is funding this, backing this, is ghastly. Elijah, man, I thank you for this. I've always appreciated your expertise on this subject matter, and I still continue to do so. Elijah Magnier, veteran war correspondent with 35 years experience in Iran, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Sudan, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia. You can follow Elijah on Twitter at EJMALRAI and find his reporting on his website, ElijahJM.wordpress.com. Elijah, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamal. All the best.
Alrighty, so let's take a break. Yes, so let's take a break. I'm going to be back in a moment. I genuinely, let's see if I got this right. There we are. I genuinely appreciate Elijah coming on. The man, he knows his stuff. He's a veteran war correspondent. He's been doing this for years. In fact, from my understanding, he said he was going to Lebanon, which terrifies me because I don't want anything to happen to him. But he knows his stuff. I gotta be honest, it's shocking to be a part of this. It's just shocking. I have witnessed, like, for example, when I was showing this clip earlier today, this is Beirut, downtown. Israel taken out. I can go into other clips where they're, in one ghastly one, I can pull it up. I didn't even pull it because it's so bad. A little girl or a little child, about 3-4 years old, is walking down the street. She gets killed, hit by a sniper. When people come to support, Israel sends artillery and bombs the entire area, killing everybody that came to help. And this just repeats itself over and over and over again. That doesn't get into the situation in Gaza with all of these people starving, Israel intentionally starving them. When Blinken, and again, I pointed out the conversation with Blinken and Netanyahu, where he goes and Netanyahu, he tells him, hey, there's a perception that you're starving people. Now, the reality is that's not a perception. Even under our systems that were in place looking at this issue, we even came to the conclusion that Israel was intentionally starving the population. Blinken lied to Congress about it. When Blinken pushed Netanyahu, hey, we need you to get rid of this perception. Can you say something against this notion that you're starving people intentionally? Netanyahu said, no, I'm not telling people that. And the reason is rather obvious. The same politics at play in the United States are the same politics at play there, meaning human beings are human beings. He knows he is the head of a fascist country. That fascist country is whipped up in a fervor to murder, slaughter, and kill Arabs and Muslims. They are not necessarily picky about who, whether they're in Palestine, whether they're in Lebanon, whether they're in Syria, all of them a fair game from their point of view. And to turn the ship around and say, well, wait a minute, we're not trying to do so-and-so. Keep in mind, this is the same government where Channel 4 News, I believe, when they caught the Israelis raping that Palestinian, putting him in the hospital using some kind of broom or device or something like that that basically injured the man. And when it came clear that systemic rape was part of the Israeli prison system, Channel 4 News had a poll from the public. Hey, what do you think about this? The plurality of the public thought that rape was perfectly fine and was perfectly to use. Meaning, this is the government that Blinken wanted Netanyahu to go out there and say, we are not intentionally trying to starve the Palestinians. Fact of the matter is, the policy that Netanyahu is going with right now is approved by the larger Israeli public. And if an election was had today, it is most likely true that Netanyahu would win. I know people always boil this down to the individual leader of a country. This is not about the leader. This is about a fascist country in and of itself. And we are giving that fascist country guns, money, and weapons. Let's take a break. You guys are listening to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. My name is Jamal Thomas. I am your host. I'm going to be the voice that's going to be in your ear for the next 2 hours. Look, you can find me Monday through Friday right here at the helm of this show, whether you're at home, whether you're asleep, whether you are making love to your wife, girlfriend, or side chick. Either way, I'm the voice that is going to be in your ear. I hope you guys are enjoying the show up to this point. Elijah Magnier, great guest. Great guest. I'm always appreciative when he joins me on the show. Coming up next is going to be Dan Kovalik. But before I get to Dan, Joe Biden is out. And Joe Biden is arguing now that Donald Trump wants to lock up or to change out every public service worker, every last one of them. And he wants the right to kill anybody that he does not like. I am not using hyperbole. I am being very literal. This is what he was saying on the campaign stage. Now, to be fair, Joe Biden has said stuff like this in the past. If you remember, he said Mitt Romney was going to have us in chains. Mitt Romney, of all people, was going to have us black folks in chains. This is Joe Biden with his new version of have us in chains. Donald Trump wants to kill people.
It's not a joke. This is a guy who also wants to replace every civil servant. Every single one. Thinks he has a right under the Supreme Court ruling on immunity to be able, if need be, if it was the case, to actually physically eliminate, shoot, kill someone who he believes to be a threat to him. I mean, so I know this sounds bizarre. It sounds like I said this 5 years ago, you'd lock me up. We gotta lock him up. Politically lock him up.
Now, again, his argument, we need to lock him up. And then at the very end, politically lock him up. Here's the rub. They have been trying to do that. They have been doing everything in their power to accomplish that very objective. So this notion of we need to lock him up. Okay, well, what are you locking him up for specifically? And truth of the matter is, it comes across as a certain bit of desperation that 2 weeks before the campaign, you're basically saying that the law should get involved in order to put somebody in jail that Kamala Harris seems to be having difficulty beating. What I would love the Democratic Party to do, because I've been thinking, what is it that they need in order to change the context of the race? What is it that you need to do in order to get people into this notion that A, they should vote for you, or for that matter, engage why they aren't voting for you? The Arab issue is pretty straightforward, right? But when you get into the other issue of so many African Americans that have decided that they are calling it quits, I saw a recent poll out that went from year to year looking at black support for the Democratic Party. And election after election, the number went down. And if I'm not mistaken, right now is at something like 75% of African Americans supporting right here. These are the estimates of support among black voters. 2016, it was at 92%. 2020, it was at 90%. 2024, New York Times Siena poll, 78%. 78%. Now, to be clear, if Trump gets 15%, the Democratic Party is going to lose this race. Full stop. And when you're looking at the race in Philadelphia right now, it is looking extremely close with, I believe, on Real Clear Politics, Donald Trump finally pulling ahead of Kamala Harris, even if it's by 0.1. That is still astonishing. Think back for a moment. Pennsylvania was the state that Republicans wanted for like 50 years. They could never get. And then all of a sudden, when they finally got it, it started teetering back and forth, back and forth. And I think for the Democratic Party, they never engage why. It's Jill Stein's fault. It's black people's fault. They're not sufficiently loyal. It's Russia's fault. They are influencing the election and getting Donald Trump elected. It's the Chinese fault. It's the Iran's fault. It's everybody else's fault but their own. Al Gore couldn't even win his own state, and yet they blamed Ralph Nader. It is the only political party in this country that blames other people for their inability to get elected. It is completely and utterly bizarre, and yet that's the Democratic Party. And so when they lose, they always look for blame as opposed to have some level of introspection as to why. How is the Democratic Party, a party that was affiliated with unions, that was supposed to be party for the working class, that's supposed to be the thing that helps ameliorate the worst edges of an economic system or the capitalistic system, they're supposed to be the thing that's a release valve to that capitalistic system. And yet you have a billionaire powered by other billionaires who is taking the mantle of being champion of the people, Donald Trump. How does that happen? How do you allow that to happen? How does that perception get ensconced into the American public? That is an astonishing thing. And that seems to be the thing that you would want to interrogate to figure out why. Because my argument is the reason that you are losing to just a bumbling idiot is because of that. There is a perception that the Democratic Party is elitist, that they're out of touch, that the distance between the Republican Party and the Democratic Party has become so negligible that voting for one or the other is less relevant. Those are big things. This notion that there's nothing big to bring people into. Say what you want about Sanders. Sanders had a coalition. Say what you want about Obama. He had a coalition. And this notion, I'm going to do healthcare. That's my key objective. That's the thing I want to get accomplished. Or Sanders, I want Medicare for all. That's what I'm going to do. We're going to $15 annual minimum wage, Medicare for all. That's the thing that I'm going to live and die over. What is that for Joe Biden? What is it for Kamala Harris? Is there anything like that for these candidates? What does she believe in? Those things are question marks. And I would point to you that that question mark is part and parcel to the reason that she is struggling right now. When 80% of the country say they want something different, and when Kamala Harris is asked over and over again, how are you different than Joe Biden? What will you do different than Joe Biden? And for her to not have an answer is a death blow to her campaign. Let's take a quick break. I'm going to bring in my guests, Dan Kovalik, do a quick turnaround, back in a moment. All right. I am working through something. I'm trying to get my guest on. Give me 1 second. And Dan will be on momentarily. That is the thing about doing it on your own. Everything and every moving part has to go correct. Let's see. Oh, I see what's going on. All right. So, give me 1 second, guys. Don't worry. I'm going to erase this part from the actual video. No harm, no foul. No, but I hope you guys are doing okay. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I am your host for the Jamarl Thomas Morning Show, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. every morning. This is going to be something that's going forward. You can support the work through PayPal, Patreon, Super Chat, etc. And even if you want to support the work, you don't want to do those things, at the very least, give us a like. There we are. Give it a like. That in and of itself will be greatly appreciated. So waiting for the guests to come on. We have the one and only Dan Kovalik. And there was a post, there was an article that was written by Daniel McAdams. And Daniel McAdams pointed out that the hawks seem to be circling Donald Trump. Now, this, insinuates that Trump is not somewhat of a hawk himself. I don't know if I would go that far. What I would say is he seems to be... The way I've always described Trump is that he does buck the orthodoxy, but he bucks it in a way that it's not necessarily means he's anti-war. It just seems to be he's open, at least more so than many of the other political actors, to making a compromise. So with North Korea, he would make that compromise. He would go over there, he would shake Kim Jong-un's hand. Kim Jong-un would stop firing missiles. That is a success. Now, what I would prefer is that there's a certain level of coherence with Donald Trump in the way he describes that. Meaning, he is continuously hit by Kamala Harris. Oh, he's cozying up to dictators and everything else. But very rarely does he give a coherent argument as to, well, yes, if you want to bring down hostilities around the world, the objective was to get him to stop firing missiles into the Sea of Japan. I got him to stop doing that by being willing to make a deal. That is something that is a positive, and that is something that you should argue for. Dan, welcome to the show. Can you hear me all right? Can you hear me okay?
Good to see you.
Oh,
yes.
Excellent, excellent. How are you doing this morning?
I'm good. How about yourself?
I am doing great. Better that you are with me. And just so I can tell people who you are, this is the one and only Dan Kovalik. Dan Kovalik is an American human rights lawyer and peace activist. He's also professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Thank you for joining me, man. I really appreciate you joining me on this.
My pleasure.
So the way these questions came about, or this kind of segment came about, was Daniel McAdams wrote a piece in the RonPaulInstitute.org, basically saying that the hawks are circling Donald Trump. And his argument for this was people like, say, for example, not the John Bodens of the world, but some of the people who Donald Trump has started to allow in his orbit. Let's say like the what is her name? I'm sorry. Nikki Haley's of the world, for example. The idea that Nikki Haley is going to join the campaign trail. And it's like, okay, if you bring these people close to you, what is that going to mean? If you remember, in the first term, Donald Trump put in John Bolton, Mike Pompeo, despite the fact that he said he wanted to be conciliatory in the way that he was going about his affairs. Now, I would argue that whatever Trump wanted to do was secondary to the attacks that were being leveled at him. So they were saying Trump is working with Russia. Trump was elected by Vladimir Putin. Bob Woodward recently said that Putin had the goods on Trump and is blackmailing him. So they're reinvigorating the whole Russiagate stuff. And so I think Bolton and Pompeo was a way to push back on some of the things that were being leveled at him. But that also means that he's susceptible to it. And I guess the question is, would he be susceptible to that in a second term? Give me a take on that. I mean, for one, I guess the basic question is, do you consider Trump to be an anti-war candidate in the way that Donald Trump is acting, or the way that they're projecting him to be? What are your thoughts?
I think with Donald Trump, it's always impossible to know. It's always, will the real Donald Trump please stand up? I think a lot of his base want these wars to end, which is, very heartening. He has people, he's surrounded himself like Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard, who are anti-war, at least when we accept, and it's a huge exception, the war in Gaza, which they don't seem to have a problem with.
With what that, and you know what? And I'm glad you mentioned RFK Jr. It came out, and when he first came out, I thought, okay, this is interesting. RFK wants to have a more peaceful world. Let's talk to our enemies. He used to quote himself in kind of the Kennedy legacy. And then when the war in Gaza happened, it was, well, screw those pampered Palestinians. Israel can do whatever it wants. So that is so contradictory. How can you can't have it both ways. You can't say, I'm an anti-war candidate, and I believe we should work with our enemies to understand them in order to bring down hostilities in the world. But in this case, screw them. I thought that's so weird and bizarre. And I agree with you. The same thing is true for this in regards to Donald Trump on this issue. There's a big asterisk on this issue, as opposed to the other ones. But I'm sorry, I interrupted. Please continue.
No, it's true. And also on Iran. I mean, Trump was always threatening Iran, and a former general said he had to convince Trump not to embark on a major invasion of Iran. So sadly, I don't think you can trust him to be an anti-war candidate, is the truth of it.
No, I agree with you. I think he's unpredictable. And that unpredictability is problematic in general, especially when you get into world affairs. I always think of Trump as being open to negotiate in a way that the orthodoxy is not. Meaning, if he gets an opportunity to end a war, he may do it. By the same token, he may also escalate because he's a petty man with a thin ego, and you don't necessarily know where he's going to go at any particular moment. It's kind of the Nixon madman theory, that you don't know where he's going. One of the other interesting things is that the Democratic Party has started to cozy up to Liz Cheney, of all people, which is just, if you could go back in time 20 years, I was coming up during the Bush years, and I remember Keith Olbermann would come on and do those monologues. He would be screaming to the top of his lungs about Bush being a war criminal, warmonger. Bush ends up getting 1 million Iraqis killed, spent $7 trillion to do it. Dick Cheney was one of the key people in that administration that was pushing Bush in that particular way. They thought he was even the brains behind it, that he was cherry-picking information and kind of pushing and edging this country on the war. I've had John Kiriakou on, and John Kiriakou was talking about how he was in a meeting where, as they were talking about the war plans, they were designing that mission to go all the way to Iran. And just so happened, they got bogged down in Iraq, which gives you the context of the Dick Cheneys of the world, the neocons of the world, that have chosen Kamala Harris as a standard bearer. And to give an example of this, they are arguing, first and foremost, before we even get to anything else, give me your take on that. I mean, the oddity that a Democrat is running around the country, multiple states, by the way, with Liz Cheney, and using Liz Cheney as a reason to put her in office, a Democrat. This is how weird. Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, well, obviously what they're trying to do is show, we're bipartisan, we can reach across the aisle, and they think that that's going to help with independent voters. But I don't think she's popular with anyone in particular. So seems like a bad judgment call. I understand the reasoning. But as you say, and also it's not just Liz Cheney, they also are now saying, Dick Cheney, thank you for your service, even though his service was getting us involved in multiple wars that based on lies. So I don't think it's so much strange as it is revealing of who they are. And that is, they are part of the war party as well. Both the Republicans and Democrats make up as, some people call, the war party. And it's true. So again, I think it's revealing more than anything.
No, I agree with you. So I think there are two parts to this. In one sense, I think these cretins of the neocons have decided that they are unsure the path Donald Trump is going to take in a foreign policy sense, either in Ukraine and maybe even in some of the other conflicts, especially with something like a North Korea or China. Whereas they are certain that Kamala Harris, for the most part, is going to continue business as usual, meaning this kind of neocon element has latched itself to the Democratic Party. So there's that. I think the other part is that they fully believe that if they can beat Trump now, then they can take their party back. So it's almost like you're joining in with your enemy to go after a bigger enemy that's within the context of the party itself. With their thought of, if we can stop Trump, if he loses the election, we can get rid of Trumpism, and we can get back this notion of the Republican Party that we had in the 90s. I guess the first question is, do you think that's going to work?
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see. The Republican and Democratic parties have changed. I think war issue, the base of the Republican Party seems to be anti-war. The base of the Democratic Party is pro-war, at least when it comes to Russia. It seems to me not as much on Palestine. So we'll see. But Donald Trump has certainly, obviously, had a major impact on the Republican Party. He is the Republican Party right now. And yeah, when he passes on from the political scene and passes to the next world, I mean, he's old enough that could happen soon. I do think the Republican Party will change, but what it'll change to or change back to, that's a whole nother question.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. And again, going with the war party stuff, Kamala Harris is using, well, there are two things. One, she's using World War II and Pearl Harbor as a justification for forever wars. And on the other sense, they're making this argument that Donald Trump wants to pull out of NATO, which there's no evidence to the contrary that that's true, that he's abandoning our allies, he's cozying up with dictators. I want to play this. This is clip number...
It's not a joke.
This is clip number
This is the guy who...
9, I believe. Let's see. Clip number...
Bringing the allies together is because they are fully aware of, and remember, to the Congresswoman's point, World War II, remember, this concept of isolation, we were once there as a nation, and then Pearl Harbor happened. Let's remember, recent history, Europe remembers it well. Then when we got attacked, Pearl Harbor, we jumped in. And it is because America jumped in that we were ultimately able to win that war. And it should be a constant reminder to us, we have to remember history, that isolationism, which is exactly what Donald Trump is pushing, pull out of NATO, abandon our friends, isolationism is not insulation.
Okay, so that clip bugs me on so many levels. For one, Donald Trump never said anything about pulling out of NATO. And two, it's this kind of insinuation. It's kind of this insinuation that we should continue to give hundreds of billions to Ukraine, continue to give 20, 30 billion to Israel, continue to give money to Taiwan in order to antagonize China because of Pearl Harbor, because of the Second World War. Give me a take on this. I mean, this is the argument that she's pushing. This is somewhat of a neocon argument, despite the fact that I'm unclear on any kind of foreign policy chops that Kamala Harris has at all. Well, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's a bizarre argument, first. I mean, yes, when you're attacked, like at Pearl Harbor, obviously you act to defend yourself.
But we're the ones that are attacking. We're the ones that expanded to the border of
We're
Russia.
at the Pearl Harbor now, right? Okay, so it's just silliness. Also, it ignores all the other steps that led to World War II. World War I, to begin with, which Wilson promised to keep us out of, and he got us into. And that war inevitably led to World War II because of the Treaty of Versailles, which Wilson and his wife helped to negotiate, which humiliated Germany and put them under incredible debt. And he was not an isolationist, and his lack of isolationism, again, helped lead to World War II. So it also ignores the fact that there were U.S. companies that supported the Nazis. It also ignores the fact that, frankly, the U.S.'s role in World War II is way overstated. It really was the Soviets that did the lion's share of the fighting and winning against the Nazis. But World War II is often misused because honestly, it's considered the last good war the U.S. fought. Even that, I think there's some mythologizing around that, but that's what it's considered. It's also considered the last war the U.S. really won. And so, yeah, they keep pointing to World War II to justify these continuing wars, which have nothing to do with World War II. And when you hear her argue it, it's just, it doesn't make. Let's face it, she's a terrible candidate. She's barely able to string two sentences together, and she rarely makes sense. So that I'm not surprised by that fact.
What do you think her foreign policy is? And to piggyback on that question, because again, I keep pointing out that I have no idea what Kamala Harris wants or what she's even doing. I mean, the reality of it is the things that she's saying, especially in something like that, is effectively, I'm going to continue the same policies that Joe Biden has basically gone with. I would argue those policies has brought the world to the brink of war. And this was New Yorker. So in the article for New Yorker, there's a line, a paragraph in this. I want to give Zay Giuliani credit. He's the one that found it. It says, Biden or in Berkeley, a former Obama administration official now in finance, told me that the firm spends tens of thousands of dollars a month on lobbyists and consultants, and yet, with, quote, all these fancy pants people, former member of Congress, nobody can tell me conclusively what she believes about anything. That is an astonishing statement. Basically, we're putting all of this money into lobbying for, we are backing her campaign, we're pushing her to the hilt, we've been in Congress, all of this stuff, and none of us have any clue what she wants or what she'll do. That is the issue in part.
Yeah, well, I think that's why they're lobbying her, because I think she doesn't have any principles. She's a blank slate. She'll do what her lobbyists tell her to do. She'll do what the neocons tell her to do. I think that's why she is the candidate for the military-industrial complex, because I don't think she has any principles. She is a puppet, for the sector, the ruling class that wants war. There's no question about that. And that's why I frankly find her quite scary, because she will not say no to the neocons.
I agree with you. I mean, not just agree with you. It's terrifying to me to not know, if that makes sense. It's when Hillary Clinton went and Hillary Clinton had a ghastly take in regards to foreign policy. You knew who she was. Obama was a little bit more circumspect. But when you get into like Bush, Cheney, when you get to these people, you have a somewhat of an idea of what these people want to do. Harris feels like it's a vehicle for just the orthodoxy. So we are going to continue to antagonize Russia. We're going to slice up the one China policy. We're going to antagonize North Korea. We are going to play this kind of global chessboard. It feels like that. I mean, in fact, the arguments that she's even making against Trump feel like that. And part of me thinks that the reason they're fighting so hard against Trump is because Trump seems to be open to make deals. Even if, like I say, he's chaotic, he's unpredictable, but he was willing to sit down with North Korea. They attack him for that, which is wild to me that they attack somebody for making peace on those terms. I agree with you with the Iran thing. He almost brought us to war in Iran. He seems to be open to getting us out the war for Ukraine. Again, I think even that's somewhat up in the air. The reality of it is, I think the things that he says about it are just off the wall. Oh, if I was there, it would have never happened. Well, kind of depends. Would you have been willing to come up with a new security architecture of Europe or not? Yeah or nay? Like, so he says these things. Oh, it'll be over with in 24 hours. And so he's somewhat more unpredictable. But I guess if I had to put a difference between the two, one seems to be willing and open to make a deal, where the other one wants the wars to continue forever. That seems to be the difference between the two, if I had to put my finger on it. I don't think either is anti-war in any sense of the word.
Well, yeah, I agree. And I also agree that Donald Trump may be willing to at least say no once in a while to the military-industrial complex,
Exactly.
to avoid the worst things happening. I don't see Kamala Harris being willing to say no.
No, I don't
And
see
that
it.
scares me.
Yeah, that terrifies me also.
If we're in a Cuban Missile Crisis type situation, And we are there in that situation now. We have the
Yep.
reverse Cuban Missile Crisis in Ukraine, where the U.S. is now threatening to send long-range missiles to Ukraine, which could be used against Russia. That could lead to World War III. And we need a president who says, no, I'm not going to do that. I don't want World War III.
And by the way, Israel has nukes. Like, that can't be ignored, especially since they seem to be like this gunning for an attack against Iran when it is clear as day that they are vulnerable. Meaning, for the first time in my lifetime, Israel has seemed to be vulnerable. Like this notion of complete deterrence, where they can do whatever they want without any notion of getting hit, where their air defense can take down, it's invulnerable, impenetrable. Okay, that's over with. Not only have they been getting hit by Hezbollah, Iran was able to basically do a precision strike in order to show their military capabilities, and Israel was vulnerable to it. So if Israel does a strike, then the response is going to be overwhelming. And I guess the question becomes, is that what they're going to use as a casus belli to now invoke the use of nuclear weapons? And more to the point, the leaks that came out. That was one of the other items I wanted to talk to you about. So there was a huge breach, a huge intel leak that came out. And it was effectively giving Israeli war plans. What was Israel planning to do, the preparation for the attack, what they might have used in the context of that attack. And one of the interesting points in that analysis was the use of nuclear weapons, basically saying that Israel doesn't seem to be planning to use nukes. Okay, but let's be clear, that is the US government acknowledging that they know that Israel has nuclear weapons, something that is this kind of weird open secret that nobody really says anything about, because there would be legal consequences associated with it if it's ever aired. What is, from your point of view, when you're looking at this particular document, and before we even go into that part, the person who leaked this, do you consider them to be a hero or traitor?
Well, I don't know for sure, but I'm going to guess hero. I think that probably the person who leaked it to try to prevent these war plans from going into effect.
Do you think is there a legal defense for that person in any sense of the word? Meaning,
well, there are these defenses of necessity and other, you can use that as a defense. Most judges don't want to hear it, but you claim that you had a greater good for doing it. Jury, of course, you could argue to the jury you had a greater good for doing it, and you could get the jury to side with you. It's called jury nullification, essentially, that they won't convict you because they say, yeah, whatever the law is, we agree, that you did something good. So, but of course, if you have to get all the way to a jury, in that case, you're probably in trouble. You're in deep trouble. But yeah, I put him in the same category as the people who leaked, the Pentagon Papers, Daniel Ellsberg, and of course Chelsea Manning, and yeah, I think, and Edward Snowden, who leaked secrets that shouldn't have been secret, and
that's the rub. You can always tell whether. Well, and I guess the secondary question is, do you think this is something that the U.S. did in a clandestine way? Meaning, send documents to the Middle East, what is called Middle East Spectator, because they don't necessarily want a broader war in the Middle East. And so this was the Biden administration's way of trying to, in a clandestine way, slow down Israel, to make them second guess what they're doing by basically outing the potential prep that went into their preparations, outing their preparations for it. Do you put any stock into that point of view?
I doubt if it was a conscious decision of the Biden administration, but clearly it was someone within the Biden administration who went off message in doing that, who took matters into their own hand to do it. And yes, I agree that they did that with the hope to slow this down.
One of the other questions associated with it, is there anything in the documents that will create, how can I say this, complications for the U.S.? And one glaring thing, it was something we mentioned earlier, nukes. I mean, you have a government assessment that effectively outs the fact that Israel has nuclear weapons. And under the what is the Non-Nuclear Proliferation Act, Israel is not a signatory to it, but the United States is supposed to have certain legal means, meaning we are breaking the law by acknowledging, in one sense, that they have nuclear weapons, but continuing to give all of this support and this blank check to Israel. What are the ramifications that's supposed to take place under law when we find one of these states having weapons or nukes?
Yeah, that's the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and yes, which the U.S. is a signatory to. And as you say, we're not supposed to give military assistance to nuclear states that haven't declared themselves to be nuclear. They have an obligation under international law to do that, and Israel's never done it. As you say, it's the elephant in the living room. It's the worst kept secret in the world. They've never declared it, but everyone knows they have it. But again, for the U.S. to admit it does raise legal implications. Again, as to whether the U.S. can continue to provide military assistance to Israel.
I'm curious, from your point of view, have you been shocked at the level to which we've been willing to basically give this blank check to Israel? I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I've never seen the U.S. government bend over backwards to this degree in order to back a country that many in the country, including myself, considers to be a genocide. They are killing women and children in mass, and Joe Biden grumbles behind the scenes, but continues to support and give money, weapons, political cover, all of this stuff too. Is this the tail leading? Well, is this the tail wagging the dog, or the dog wagging the tail? Meaning, is this Israel with its hooks in the U.S., where the Biden administration feels like it can't do anything? It feels like it's in a box because it's going to be politically punished if it does something by the Israeli lobby, or is this just U.S. policy in effect? Where do you follow this?
I think it's U.S. policy. I mean, we don't have to be sending 2,000-pound bombs to Israel, for example. I mean, which we are. We're giving them everything they want when they want it. They could do it with a phone call. There's been historic precedent for that. Ronald Reagan did that with Menachem Begin. Eisenhower did that with the Suez Canal crisis. It can be done. The fact it's not being done, it means they don't want to do it. And frankly, they're willing to lose the election over this, right? They are losing the Arab vote. They know that. They very well may lose Michigan over this and the entire election because of their insistence on supporting Israel through this genocide, and yet they continue to do it. Well, that says to me that they're all in, right? I mean, they won't even stop doing it for their own political salvation.
Well, that's the part that's weird to me. Like the notion that you would go down with the ship for Israel when Netanyahu seems to be doing everything in his power to make Joe Biden look bad. I mean, Joe Biden comes out and he seems to try to massage this notion of, well, I don't want him to go into Rafah. I don't want this type of weapons to be used. And Netanyahu blows it all off and then throws it back in his face. The United States is preventing me from prosecuting this war and keeping Israel safe. Like, I've never seen somebody get put in the okie doke in this way and continues to go along with it. Because you're right. From my point of view, some of the recent polling showed that if Kamala Harris took a different tact than Joe Biden, then she would be able to get additional support in the Arab vote. But do you think it's from their calculus, the support that they get in the Arab vote or the public that wants her to do something is going to be lost in people who don't want her to do something? Meaning that's the box that they find themselves in. So they are somewhat incoherent. Now, I would argue that the incoherence is the problem. That if you take a tack in one direction that's clear, you will get far more bang for your buck. And I think that's why Trump is winning in the Arab vote on this. I think there are 2 points. One, Joe Biden is the one that is in office that is prosecuting this. So there's that. 2, Donald Trump is coherent. So he says, yes, we should give all the weapons and money to Netanyahu, let him do what he wants. Whereas Kamala Harris gives this kind of weird mealy mouth, October 7th, the Palestinian plight is horrible, but October 7th, And she skates this kind of weird line where she really doesn't say anything at all on this issue. In fact, to back your point up, Donald Trump has started to go after her when he realized a recent poll, it was a YouGov poll of Arab Americans and who they were voting for. 45% was going to Trump, 43% for Kamala Harris, 4% for Jill Stein. Somebody on Donald Trump's staff must have told him this. And so he came out recently at the campaign rally and he said this.
You ask yourself, why would Muslims support Lion Kamala Harris when she embraces Muslim-hating and very dumb person Liz Cheney, a dumb person, who, by the way, lost for Congress in the biggest margin in the history of politics. She lost by almost 40 points. The reason she has that honor is that most people wouldn't have stayed in. A congressperson that's in that position normally retires before the election, which would have been a good idea for her to do. But Liz Cheney's a total loser. But her father brought years of war and death to the Middle East. He killed many Arabs, many Arabs and Muslims. And now Lion Kamala has embraced Liz Cheney. She embraced her. And why would a Muslim or why would an Arab want to vote for somebody that has Liz Cheney as her hero? Liz Cheney is a totally failed.
He has a point. I mean, granted, he's back in Netanyahu, who's currently killing all of these people, but he does have a point, and he's effectively using Liz Cheney as a battering ram to hit Kamala Harris.
Yeah, well, many times Trump says, inconvenient truths. He's a very, interesting politician. And this is an inconvenient truth. I mean, that Kamala cannot get away from that. She's embraced this war, this genocidal war. She tries to say some conciliatory. It's BS. But yeah, he's right. By embracing Dick Cheney, you're embracing the murder of over 4 million Muslims, which, according to Brown University, have died during, the wars after 9/11, like 4.7 million. And she doesn't get called out on it by the mainstream press, who also are fine with those wars, who helped lead us into those wars. And yeah, Donald Trump's taking advantage of it. Why wouldn't he? And again, as you say, he's pregnant on this issue as well. He's saying, Israel needs to finish this, and he's threatening Iran, and he's probably not going to be any better on this issue than Harris. But as you say, the problem for Harris is it's her administration doing it right now. They have the ones with blood on their hands. Trump is not in office. And when you hear Arabs and particularly Palestinians on this issue, which I do talk to those folks, they just want to punish Biden and Harris for this. And they will vote for Trump or a third party or not vote at all because of that, So, and I get it. That's why I voted for Jill Stein, to be clear. I was not going to vote for either of the candidates, and I certainly was not going to vote for Harris, given what's happened in Gaza.
I feel like, look, man, I agree with you. Jill Stein, I wrote Jill Stein in D.C. She wasn't on the ballot. I feel like genocide should be a red line, that people in a political party should have standards, and those standards, on some level, should be enforced. And the indiscriminate killing or backing a political party and rewarding that political party for the indiscriminate killing of women, children, I mean, for God's sake, pretending as if this stuff happened on October 7th, that is a red line to me. That seems to be, you shouldn't get rewarded for supporting something like this. And elections go beyond just the individual election. And there should be a bright red line in the future, going forward. No Democrat can win an election if they are supporting and backing a genocide. I think that should be clear as day. Why do you think that more people don't take that tact? And what I mean by that, explain it. You get you had all of these kids that were out at the camp at the colleges protesting, this is a genocide. We need this to stop, especially for Joe Biden. When Joe Biden was in office, if you remember, there was a huge coalition that was going after Joe Biden, calling him Genocide Joe. Joe Biden is backing a genocide, et cetera, et cetera. When Kamala Harris gets in, it almost vanishes. It was still at the college campuses, but for the most part, they didn't bring it up. She wasn't touched with it. Even at the DNC convention, if you notice, they didn't even allow the person on stage. It was almost night and day. It was like a soul leaving a body. She was completely untethered to a policy that Joe Biden was running with that for the most part she fundamentally supports. Is it just Trump? Where they can say Trump is just that much worse, and so we can't really do anything about this issue? Give me your take on this. It just seems like the amount of support on this issue evaporated when Harris took over the helm.
Well, in many ways it did, and we see this a lot. We saw that with the peace movement really went to sleep under Obama's 8 years in office as well. I mean, it's the problem with this binary political system in which people have these tribal commitments to one party or the other, and when their party's in power, they don't say boo. And so when it was Harris's war and people got so excited about Harris, many, not all, because a lot of students continued to protest. There were still some protests, but they got smaller. And I do think it's because, we want Harris, and therefore we're not going to rock the boat. And of course, that's just bad politics. It's also shows a lack of moral commitment on a very moral issue like genocide. It's very disappointing, but we see this time and again. And frankly, that's I don't necessarily embrace this argument, but that's why some leftists say, well, a Republican's better in office because usually protest war, which tend to be liberals,
Yeah.
Um,
I don't embrace
one
that
protest
argument.
there. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. I was just saying I don't embrace that argument either.
Right.
What do you say? And this could be the final question. What do you say to those Democrats? Because this has been an argument in the context of the Democratic Party. The Republican Party there's no contradiction on this issue. They're fine with killing as many Arabs, Muslims as possible, as necessary, especially in the context of a war with Iran, which seems to be insane to me, but whatever. What do you say to Democrats in these conversations that you may be having with, we got to put in Kamala Harris, that issue is really bad, I understand that, but I live here in the United States, Harris is the candidate we need to put in, maybe she'll do something about it later, Donald Trump is going to be worse, he's going to do the same thing. I'm sure you've had these conversations. I've seen them on Twitter all the time, they're on social media, I've had them in person myself, where I've gotten to arguments back and forth for my position on this. What is your message to those Democrats that is willing to ignore moral concerns for their own political ambitions currently in the country? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I'm very critical of them, and I'm very critical when I discuss it, or I'm very critical on social media, even though most of my social media friends are liberals who will vote for Kamala Harris. I'm very open about the fact that you just can't morally do that, And I make the analogy. It's like saying we need to vote for Ted Bundy so that John Wayne Gacy doesn't become president. And actually, I think it's a good analogy, because Kamala Harris is more like Ted Bundy, who's a handsomer, more likable guy on the surface, and of course, Trump more resembles the clown killer, John Wayne Gacy. The point being, though, that I don't feel the obligation to make that decision between two candidates that support genocide, and in particular, I'm not going to vote for a candidate who is actively committing a genocide. To me, it's a moral issue. Also, I think in the run of this election, we're not going to vote for you if you keep supporting the genocide. If enough people were really willing to make that statement and go to the street and say that, it could have made a big difference, I think, or at least had a chance to.
No, you're right. 1,000% right. I mean, because that's the whole part about standards, right? Like, okay, if we do this, we're going to lose. So we need to do something else to get these people in some way. But if you think the coalition is not big enough, then you can ignore that coalition. I mean, if you remember, the uncommitted vote had some, it was like 150,000 or something like that in Michigan, and the Democratic Party basically blew that vote off. So yeah, I agree with you. Like I said, these conversations are probably going to continue. Dan, man, I really appreciate you joining me. Dan Kovalik, much appreciated. Dan Kovalik, he's an American human rights lawyer. I'm sorry, human rights and labor rights lawyer. He's also a peace activist. He's a professor at the University of Pittsburgh. Dan, where can people find you, by the way?
Twitter's a good place, at Daniel M. Kovalik. Also, I want to mention I have a new book out here, The Case for Palestine, right
Please.
behind me.
Oh,
Why
you
it
even wrote the book.
why it matters and why you should care. There you go.
Excellent, excellent. Even wrote the book. Dan Kovalik, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. You have a good one.
Take care.
All
You too.
right.
Bye-bye.
We have, let's see. Want to make sure this is right. Okay. So, Dan has left. Let's reset. All right. Dan Kovalik, great guest. He knows his stuff. He even wrote the book. I gotta be honest, I didn't know he wrote the book on that issue. He's a human rights lawyer. I mean, Dan and I have debated, if I remember, I believe it was Dan, on the Ukraine-Israel thing. I'm sorry, on the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Because again, this is an issue where I tend to be at odds with the left on. But I'm at odds with it because I'm pragmatic and practical. And I know that if a country is under threat, that the country is going to defend itself. The United States is not a flower, flowing in the wind. The country that was behind all of the wars in either Iraq and Afghanistan, the dirty wars in Syria where they tried to overthrow the government of Syria, the overthrow in Iran that took place, putting in the Shah, the overthrow of governments in South America, etc., the Vietnam War. This is not a dandelion country. And if that hostile country is part of a hostile military organization that is expanding to the border, then yeah, they're trying to create a fait accompli by effectively surrounding Russia. Knocking over the government of Ukraine is an aggressive act. It is literally overthrowing the government of Ukraine. They call it a revolution of dignity. It was a government overthrow. Call it what it is. If the same thing happened in the United States, let's say the mob on January 6th overthrew the government of the United States, do you honestly think that they would call it a revolution of dignity, or would they call it a coup? They would call it a coup. Same situation for the Cuban Missile Crisis, where you have the Soviet Union bringing in Cuba to put missiles in Cuba, attacking the U.S. The U.S. didn't turn around and say, well, Cuba is an independent country. Cuba can do whatever it wants. No, our point of view was this is on our border, and we are willing to end the world because of such. That was our point of view. That was the point of view that we took. Then immediately, when you get Ukraine expanding to the border of Russia, all of a sudden they say, well, Russia doesn't have security guarantees. Russia doesn't get to say that they're concerned about their security interests. I mean, this is nonsense. The level of hypocrisy of this is off the walls. I guess that's kind of my key point. You have to deal with reality as it is. If you are one of these countries, you have every right to look at the situations and say, this is a threat to us, considering the countries that are involved in doing so. The left can turn around and say, well, Russia's at fault for invading. Fair enough. By the same token, you have to acknowledge that NATO being expanded to the border of the country, then overthrowing Ukraine, trying to get the military base in Sevastopol, trying to ingratiate itself or ingratiate Ukraine into the NATO format where it would literally be on the border. So any conflict that kicks off immediately kicks off with Russia surrounded. No country, including the United States, will accept that premise. That is just being honest. That's where I see that stuff. I'm sitting on the moon, looking at events. What does it look like? I have a super chat. One is coming from Diane Thomas. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. The other one is Deborah Wilson. Deborah, shout out to you. I met you at J.C. Penney's. I don't know if you've heard Beck's song. I want to get with you and your sister. I think her name is Deborah. Love that song. Love that song. But no, guys, I really appreciate it. All right, so let me see. Let me do a time check. All right, it's 9 o'clock. I need to bring in my next guest. So I am going to do a reset and I will be back in a moment. How you doing, Shoban? Can you hear me? All right.
Hi, Jamarl. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Shoban,
Can you see me?
I can hear you, I can see you, and we are a go. How you doing today, man? You doing all right?
I'm fine, thank you. Thanks very much. How are you doing, Jamal? How
I'm
things
doing
in back?
good. We haven't had the opportunity to talk for a while, so I'm glad you can join me. I really appreciate you joining me, especially on this issue. This is going to be big. So let me introduce you. We are joined with Shoban Saxena. He's a Sao Paulo-based journalist reporting on trade, culture, music, and of course, football. Despite the interest of international, I'm sorry, despite an interest in international human rights and politics, Saxena's previous position as editor for the Sunday Times of India, and in his current journalism, he has not overlooked the lives of the regular people in the countries of interest. He has worked with Times of India, he's worked with the Indian Express, the Hindu, and he's currently a contributor to the White House, I'm sorry, to the Wire and Brazil Wire. Is that true? Are you still doing the Brazil Wire? What are you doing today? I want to make sure that the bio is correct.
Yeah, I'm contributing right now to the Hindu and the Wire of India, not
Okay.
Brazil Wire. Brazil Wire is a Brazilian website in English, the only Brazilian website in English in Brazil.
Is
Actually,
it?
is it? And it's
Wow.
pretty neat. It's a very interesting site, and you have all the news about Brazil in English, which you don't find anywhere else.
Well, Brazil Wire is one of those sites that I used to read. They did great work on Lula when Lula was arrested, and they were going into the pretext for it, how the stuff he was basically being railroaded, the U.S. role in that railroading. Yeah, the work on it was absolutely great, and if I'm not mistaken, I think that's how I found you. I think it was probably through Brazil Wire, one of those magazines. So no, man, thank you for joining me. Right now, BRICS Summit is going on. I think we're in day 2 of BRICS. This is taking place in Kazan. This is the fifth largest, I'm sorry, city in Russia. And it's massive. Right here, the BRICS Summit is taking place right now in Kazan. There are nearly 20,000 delegates, 30 countries that are expected to join. This is just a massive undertaking. And just to give some level of scale, the current BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Ethiopia, Egypt, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, collectively they represent around 46% of the world's population, 36% of the global GDP. And on this, you have countries like Turkey seeking membership into the organization. This is rather amazing. I'm curious, can you contextualize for me? I mean, Turkey is really amazing because they're part of NATO, right? And I know these are two different organizations. One is a military organization, one is an economic, but oftentimes those things dovetail, like being part of the EU and being part of NATO. They kind of go together. I'm curious, if you had to contextualize the purposes and even the hope of BRICS for the wider world to a Western audience, what would it be? How would you do that? How would you explain the purpose and the intention behind BRICS?
Thanks again, Jamal, for inviting me to your show. I think this BRICS summit in Kazan in Russia is one of the most important summits in the history of BRICS, if not the most important, since BRICS was started in 2009. And a couple of reasons I say that. The first reason is, as you said before, BRICS started with 5 founding countries: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now they have expanded to 10 countries. They have Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Ethiopia, and UAE as members. And more than 34 countries are participating, countries or world organizations are participating in the BRICS summit. And more than 10 countries are now ready to join BRICS group. So this really shows, Jamal, how in the past 15 years, 20 years, the world has changed in a very, very dramatic and drastic manner. The power now, the economic power now lies with Asia. If I have to explain to the Western audience what is the significance of this BRICS summit, the most important part here is to understand the world is changing. The world has changed. The whole dynamics of the international relations has changed dramatically. The power, the post-war Second World War world, where the power was with the United States, other European countries, doesn't exist anymore. The emerging countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and other countries, you have to remember, the more people, almost of the 8 billion population we have on this planet, 7 billion live in global south, and another important point here, since the military operation started in Ukraine by Russia in 2022, the Western governments and Western media have been telling the whole world that Russia is isolated. Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, is isolated. Today, Vladimir Putin is hosting 36 world leaders, including the United Nations Secretary General. So all this propaganda, all these falsehoods have been proven wrong. So most important part, and after this meeting, this 3-day meeting, you have Vladimir Putin hosting President Xi Jinping of China, Narendra Modi of India, President Pezeshkian of Iran, and leaders from Saudi Arabia, Egypt. I think it's a very important meeting, and some of the very important decisions about how to do trade without dollar, how to create new payment systems, how to create more bridges between BRICS countries is going to come out of this meeting. And also they're going to set the agenda for the next BRICS meeting, which will be held in Brazil in 2025. Of course, President Lula is not there because he fell in the bathroom and he had a mild hemorrhage. He could not travel. But Mauro Vieira, who's the foreign minister of Brazil and very competent foreign minister, he's there representing Brazil. Brazil is participating fully in this meeting. And I think we'll have some really earth-shattering decisions being taken at the summit, which will, as I said before, the world is changing, and these decisions will further enhance or speed up the changes already taking in the international order.
Agreed. I mean, it's fascinating. I mean, it is hard to get across having 50% of the globe to be part of an organization, or like nearly 40% of the world's trade. If you remember, Obama was trying to do that with the Trans-Pacific Partnership, but the difference is this is a coalition of nations that have an interest in seeing a new world. I mean, when they're saying multipolar world, on some level, BRICS seems to be a template or starting a base point for it. Putin was asked, what is the difference between BRICS and the European Union? And he pointed out, well, we're not an organization yet. We don't have a body of rules. We don't have this kind of mechanisms in place like the European Union where these things are bound together. This is an interest-based organization, meaning we are there for our collective interests moving forward. I was fascinated by that answer because what it gets across is how young the organization is. Meaning the organization is trying to take on a massive undertaking. We want to de-dollarize. We want to be able to do our trade in our own currency. We want to have a new world order in the context of how nations engage with each other. We don't want a hegemon. We're sick of the hegemons. We want to deal with each other on equal terms. This sounds almost like a United Nations in regards to the way they intended the UN to work. If you had to go 10 years, 15 years into the future, What do you think it looks like in the context of BRICS and the way it works in the larger world?
The Minister of External Affairs Government of India, Dr. Jaishankar, was recently asked this question. Why is India so keen on BRICS? Why do you need BRICS? And he gave a very interesting answer. These are the rich countries formed a club called G7. It's a closed club. And you close the door to everyone else. And some of the countries like Italy and England, they're not really big economies anymore. Like the Indian economy is bigger than the economy of Italy.
Well,
The
England has
Indian
fallen to
economy is
number
bigger.
10 on the list.
Yes,
Germany,
I mean, Indian economy,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. So what is the significance of G7? Now the combined GDP of the BRICS countries is bigger than the combined GDP of G7 countries. And if you take in terms of purchasing power, parity is much higher. And in the next 10 years, the situation is going to change again because India is going to be number 3 economic power in the world. So you will have 2 BRICS countries. Russia also in the top 10 economies. So you can imagine the BRICS country, the heft and the economic muscle they will have. I think BRICS is going to become one of the most important and institutions in the world. I mean, as you said, it was launched in 2009. There were no institutions, there were no rules. But I think over the past 15 years, they have made some institutions, especially the BRICS Bank. It's a very big development. Okay, the BRICS Bank situated in Shanghai. They have a headquarters. BRICS Bank is engaged with not only BRICS countries, with other countries, including many countries in Africa. I think you'll see in the near future BRICS setting up a secretariat somewhere and some kind of permanent station somewhere in the countries. And you know, Brazil is a good candidate for that. And in the world, I think there are more than 30 countries are willing to join BRICS, and slowly we'll see more countries from the global south, especially from Africa, Latin America, and Asia, going to join BRICS or trying to join BRICS. And the BRICS will have to develop a mechanism of partnerships. How they bring in members as full members or as partner countries. The leaders from India and Brazil and China always ask this question. Is it an anti-Western alliance? The West doesn't understand this. This is not anti-Western alliance. This is a non-Western alliance. And the reason the non-Western countries needed to form this alliance because you have shut the door to all the emerging countries. I mean, India, the biggest democracy in the world, doesn't have a seat on UN Security Council. It's a joke. There's no representation for Africa in UN Security Council. Brazil, the biggest country in Latin America, doesn't have a seat in UN Security Council. I think these institutions like the United Nations or the Bretton Woods institutions like the World Bank and IMF set up the Second World War, they have lost their relevance because they're not able to adapt to the world that has changed in a very dramatic manner in terms of economy, in terms of political power. And the West is not able to push around very much with emerging countries, whether it's India or Russia and China. We have seen how all the possible questions. I think in the next 15 years, we'll see BRICS in a much stronger position with more institutions, with more offices, and the more countries engaging with it. And it will really emerge as an alternative and a very strong alternative to World Bank, IMF, even United Nations. If UN doesn't reform itself, there is chance it may become completely irrelevant, and it has become irrelevant. We have seen the kind of things going on Gaza and Lebanon, and UN has completely, absolutely failed. And Israel has the audacity to declare the UN Secretary General as persona non grata. In Israel, so that is the world is watching this. The world is watching this. The world is watching how the US, the role, a very very notorious role US is playing in it. The world is watching Europe, and world has realized it has to move on from the Western controlled world order.
And I think you make a really good point. I don't know if it's they can't adjust and change. I think this stuff was set up for a very specific point. And the point was to allow certain countries to have control over the means, the mechanism, the rule set, the quote unquote rules based order. Basically, we make the rules, everybody else follows it. We can change these rules when these rules are no longer in our best interests. And I think that stuff has shown itself for what it is. You can pull that up until maybe 2000, but at a certain point, these other countries are going to want to develop. They're going to want to grow their own economies. They're not necessarily going to want to be constrained. And when you get like China, Russia, etc., you can kind of understand why they would move in a particular direction and why they would want to create their own thing, especially if the old thing was set up in a way that, let's say, advantaged some over others. So no, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, in fact, you have other countries, the most recent countries that were trying to get in, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Malaysia. They formally applied to become members. And many, as you pointed out, like 30 other countries were interested in joining. And I guess we answered the question on why they want to join. Well, obviously, they want something different. They want to be able to do trade. And I think a really good point to this is also the way the U.S. has used the dollar as a weapon. Oh, I think that's big. Like, the U.S. had the reserve currency of what, like 70% of the country, 75% of the world use the dollar. That number is down to 50-something%. And Russia, in this conference, no less, was showing off a payment mechanism to basically go around the dollar that they are growing and developing. That is going to be huge. Give me your thoughts on that. How far have they gotten along with, again, this, we're talking about this, it's a very new organization. And so for them to be talking about something as complicated and as, I would even argue, revolutionary as a payment mechanism to get around the dollar is pretty astonishing when you think about what they're trying to accomplish. How far have they gotten with this new payment mechanism that they're trying to enact?
Yeah, before coming to the issue of dollar, I think I'll just quickly talk about Turkey. This is very interesting. You mentioned Turkey. Turkey is a member of NATO, and despite being a member of NATO, and Turkey has been trying for decades to enter European Union, but they won't let Turkey join European Union. So they forced Turkey to look east. Turkey is a very interesting country. It's part Asian, it's part European. The culture is more similar to Asia than to European culture. And so even Saudi Arabia is a very, very close ally of the United States.
Yeah.
It's not a member of BRICS. No, because now these countries, like whether Saudi Arabia, Egypt are also again a close ally of the United States.
Yeah.
And Turkey. Now they know there is an alternative. They don't have to depend on the Western countries or Western created institutions for everything. And that is a very big message going out very clearly and loudly to the entire world. There is an alternative, which is which is a better alternative, because they're not, the BRICS countries, they're not dominated by a single country. There's no hegemon, as you mentioned. They don't believe in arm twisting countries. They're here to develop countries, help countries in development. You don't hear about development in the all narrative coming from Western countries. The only thing they talk about war and sanctions, and the woke ideology.
We'll pull a military base in your country, and you're going to get money from us,
And
but we're going
in
to tell
that
you
context,
how your country should act.
Sorry.
Oh no, I'm sorry. There was a lag. I'm sorry.
But only,
I thought you had stopped. I'm sorry. Please continue.
Okay. Every time there's some kind of a friction, India and China are two big countries. They have a border of 4,000 kilometers, So they are two big countries side by side. There'll be some differences, some friction. Every time there's some problem, the US jumps in and tells India, we are willing to give you more arms. We're willing to give you more weapons. They want to fish in troubled waters. That is the only business they know is the business of war and selling weapons and arms. Now, coming back to the question of de-dollarization, of course, it's not easy. Dollar has been the reserve currency of the world for almost 70, 75 years, more than that, actually. And it has dominated the world trade since the end of the World War. But the very fact that the countries are not looking to do business without dollar, I think is a huge change, Countries, it doesn't make any sense. Like poor countries in Africa, for example, Uganda doing trade with Kenya in dollar. They're poor countries. They spend a lot of money to buy dollar and give to a neighboring country. They can do business with each other in their national currencies. I think the same applies to BRICS countries. India and China, for example, they can do business with each other in national currencies. And after they impose sanctions on Russia, after the conflict started in Ukraine, India has been doing business with Russia in the national currency. India has been paying Russia in rupees. Even they've paid Russia in yuan, which is a Chinese currency, which is also a very good example of cooperation between the BRICS countries. After they imposed sanctions on Russia and they stole Russian reserve currency of $600 billion, US and Europe together, I think that alarmed the whole world, including India. I've known from my own sources how the people in the government of India were really worried about it because India has more than $700 billion in reserve. You know, Brazil has almost $600 billion in reserve. So tomorrow, if you have a conflict with the West, is some problem. And you can know all these things happen in Canada and US. I'm sure you're following it. The difference is they can seize your.
Yeah, they steal it.
If you one day you have $300 billion, next day it's gone, and they want to pay that money to Ukraine. I mean, this is the worst kind of criminal behavior you can do to a country. So I think if you, in that context, the BRICS countries are realizing, first of all, if they do business with each other in dollar, it makes more sense. It's better for them. And they realize the dollar is not a reliable currency because of the behavior of the Western countries. So I think the process has started. They're setting up the mechanism. I think we have a very important discussion as Kazan, but I can tell you we'll have important decisions taken at the next BRICS summit. Between now and next summit, we'll see major changes in the BRICS countries, developing they're talking about building a BRICS bridge, a new payment mechanism, and how to do more trade in national currencies. So if we're talking about 40% of the global GDP is now with BRICS, with more countries coming in, it will increase even further. I think we'll have a situation very soon where 50% of the global GDP will be with BRICS countries. And even if they do a part of this, not entirely, without dollar, it will be a huge change. It will affect global trade. It will eventually affect the dominance that dollar has for the past 7-8 decades. That will also be affected in a very, very big way.
Shoban, there's another thing that it seems to be clear to me, and I want to get your take on. It seems that we're going into a new norm in regards to world affairs. So, like, people look back and they would be, okay, the Romans. Or they would look back and they might say, okay, the Chinese are running this particular era. But each era, there's certain changes that we, as a world, don't go back to. We consider those things wrong. So we would say, yeah, having gladiators fight to the death is wrong. Slavery is wrong. Those are things that we shouldn't necessarily do. I get the sense that the world is going to look at having a hegemon in a very similar light. The U.S., the way that it's used the dollar, the way it pushes war. I mean, if you think of the country that is pushing for wars everywhere, it is us. If you think of Taiwan and the antagonism with China, if you think of using India to try to antagonize China, or trying to use China to antagonize Russia. I mean, this was a harebrained idea at the time. They were antagonizing Russia and China at the same time while trying to use China to go against Russia. If you think of the Ukraine conflict, basically NATO expanding to the border of Russia, knocking over Ukraine and using it as a battering ram. These are wars that we are either pushing for this kind of geopolitical expansion in what sense, or using chaos in order to maintain control. Syria, for example, trying to overthrow the Assad government using terrorists to basically try to overthrow a government, and when it doesn't work, steal the land, steal the oil, steal the wheat, etc. Even North Korea, where we're doing these kind of military exercises off their border, North Korea says stop. They fire off missiles into the Sea of Japan, and we pretend like North Korea is just crazy, as opposed to, no, they have actual vital interests that we're ignoring. We are a hostile, belligerent nation, and I get the sense that the world is tired of it. When you look at BRICS, Saudi Arabia, Iran put their issues to bed for the most part. India and China recently put their issues to bed, again, for the most part. Military exercises, or Iran was invited to military exercises with Saudi Arabia. And of course, I didn't even bring up Israel, where we are giving them a blank check to murder as many Arabs as possible. These things are uniting the world in a way where there seems to be a crisis point that we're reaching. And if we get past that crisis point, whatever comes afterward is going to be different. And different in a way where this notion of a hegemon, I don't know if the world is necessarily going to go in that direction again. Give me your take on that. And I guess I bring that up because it seems that BRICS has been a moderating influence on these countries that have joined BRICS, whereas we tend to use chaos as a measure to maintain control. Give me your thoughts. This could be the last question.
Okay, the Western countries, the European countries, they lost their empire in empires in the 20th century. They were kicked out of Asia and Africa, but they didn't lose their imperial attitude. You know, so they should believe in the game of divide and rule. Using other countries as pawns on a chessboard. Brzezinski wrote about it. I mean, he called it, the book is the great. Their resources of poor countries to enrich themselves. They haven't changed in that scene. The center of colonial of the empire moved from London to New York. That's the only difference now. There's no other big difference. No, and they talk a lot about hegemony. That okay, if China becomes too powerful, it will replace US as a hegemon. I think this is a wrong narrative. The alternative to hegemony of a single country is not create a new hegemon. The alternative is a multipolar world. And this is what's happening. And this is the importance of BRICS because countries, China, of course, is more powerful economically than India. It has $19 trillion economy. India is a $4 trillion economy. Russia is much less. Brazil also is much less. But these countries treat each other as equals. India treats Brazil as equal, and Brazil treats Russia as equal, and China treats these countries as equal. China is not trying to dominate these countries in any possible way. We see a lot of negative press in the Western media, about how China is exploiting. China and India are not exploiting Africa. This is beyond ridiculous. The West has not done anything. I mean, what West has done to Africa is the most shameful chapter in human history
Yes.
over the past 500 years, starting with slavery, and that has not changed till now. So I think what we are seeing, Jamal, is an emergence of a multipolar world, and a multipolar world will have, and US can be a pole, or European Union can be a pole in this multipolar world. But if they believe that they're going to dominate the world for the next 50 years, 100 years, it's not going to happen because the dominance of the Western countries was an aberration. If you go back to 18th century, when the British came to India, the Mughal Empire had contributed 25% to global GDP, and the Chinese contributed 25%. India and China had 50% contribution to global GDP in the 18th century. And when the British left India, that had come down to 1.5%. So you can see how the country was impoverished,
Just
same with China,
rivalry.
and they
Yeah.
became dominant power. Now that age,
That's amazing.
technological superiority anymore. The West doesn't have the population which can sustain the economy. They don't have huge middle class. In that change, there's been a dramatic change which Western countries failing to or refusing to, they're in denial mode. The world is changing. They're being left behind. A multipolar world is emerging, but they refuse to accept the reality, and they're playing the old imperial games of creating new wars because the war in Ukraine has not ended, and they're already talking about war with China in Taiwan. So this is for them the solution to this ongoing wars, never-ending wars, is having more wars. So that is suicidal,
That
and that
terrifies
will
me,
lead
by
to,
the way. That
yes, that
terrifies
is
me.
the,
Yeah.
yeah. But most empires in the world, since the Great Roman Empire to the Mughal Empire in India, collapsed because of wars, and we are seeing the same thing happening to the Western empire, going down the hole because of wars, and we're seeing an emergence of a new world order. I think which is a very very good news for the majority of the population of the world because there's an alternative based on development and cooperation and not hegemony and dominance.
Agreed. And, in the 80s, so, you can make the argument that, well, the U.S. is freedom and justice. We believe in love and light. Soviet Union is the even empire. You can make that case. And the world would accept that case. It is harder to make the argument that, well, we're a hegemon. You should like the fact that we're a hegemon. We're indispensable. We are somehow better culturally and everything else. And that this idea for a multipolar world is a bad thing. How do you make that argument? Like, how do you look another person into the face and say, I'm indispensable? You, however, are not. And your notion of wanting to be equal to each other, you need to scrap that. I don't think the argument works, whether it's to the global south, whether it's to Africa. They are bewildered by why the rest of the world is not backing them in Ukraine or we're not backing them in Israel. They're bewildered by it. And I think the reality of it is that they're sick of being talked down to, for one. Two, they want to be equals and treated as equals. And this notion of war as a means of control is getting old. So, Shoban, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me. It's been a while since we talked, and I've always enjoyed these conversations. So, don't be a stranger. Definitely stay around. Shoban Saxena.
Sure.
Thank you, man.
Thank
he is
you.
a Sao Paulo-based journalist reporting on culture, music, and of course, football. Despite an interest in international affairs, human rights, and politics, he has not lost focus on the people who are on the ground. You can find them. By the way, where can people find you today, Shoban? Just so the audience will know.
Sorry?
Where can we find you today? Where can the audience find you if they want to look up your work?
Twitter. I'm not very active in Twitter but I use Twitter, and I also have Facebook, and they can Google my name and find all my articles, on various platforms, The Wire, The Hindu, The Times of India. I've been living here since 2012, and I've reported mainly for Times of India,
Yeah.
and The Hindu, The Wire. They're big Indian publications, and I do a lot of work locally, but it's all in Portuguese language, with Brazilian, mostly alternative media, not the mainstream media in Brazil too.
Well, that is where I found you. Man, thank you for this. I appreciate it. You have a good one. All right, guys.
Thank you, Jamal.
I'm going to take a break. I'm going to be back with my next guest. Jamal Thomas Show, back in a moment. All right. Bye-bye. Okay. Welcome back. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Jamarl Thomas Show, coming to you from Washington, D.C., doing it to you in your ear hole from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. That sounds nasty. That sounds like a Jeffrey Toobin thing. But nevertheless, we're here. I hope you guys are doing great this morning. We've had a really great show. I have made a mistake. So Michael Tracy was supposed to come on at 9 o'clock. Shoban was supposed to come on at 9:30. So Michael is probably a little pissed at me. I've asked him if he can come on at 9:30 to join. I suspect he is not going to join me. So we are just going to have to make do with what we got. One of the things that I was going to have a conversation with him about has to do with this article out in the New Yorker. And the article has this wild quote that's in it, at least wild to me. Let me see if I can find it. I want to get the exact quote. But effectively, what they are referring to is Kamala Harris and the fact that she is an unknown quantity. So right here, this. Okay, that is not what I was looking for. Give me 1 second. There we are. That's what I'm looking for. All right. So they make it the fact that she's an unknown quantity. Right here. Biden or Berkeley, a former Obama administration official now in finance, told me that his firm spends tens of thousands of dollars a month on lobbyists, consultants, and yet, quote, all these fancy pants former members of Congress, nobody can tell me conclusively what she believes about anything. Think about that for the moment. The person that is running for office, they are lobbyists trying to get her elected, and when asked, what do you think her policy is? What do you think she actually wants in real terms? They don't have an answer. Even they themselves don't know. How do you run a campaign if people don't know who you are, or for that matter, they believe that you're purely transactional in the way that you go about your affairs? Meaning, I'm just trying to get from point A to point B. I just want to get elected. Once you put me in that office, you will figure out what I do. How are you different than Joe Biden? Well, there's not much different than I would have done than him. How are you different? Meaning, she hasn't defined herself in any real way. Now, you can make an argument that she only had, 2 months, 3 months in order to prosecute the campaign. But that is an issue for the Democratic Party. Nobody told the Democratic Party not to have a primary. Nobody told Joe Biden to run again when he said he was a transitional candidate. Nobody told him to do any of those things. Nobody told them to avoid debates. Nobody told the Democratic Party to make adjustments and changes in order to allow Joe Biden to get a much better look, meaning moving New Hampshire, moving Iowa, because they were concerned that maybe Joe Biden would lose New Hampshire as a sitting president or look bad in that election. Nobody told them to do any of these things. If Joe Biden would have stepped down, let the political process play out, you would have got the strongest Democrat. If that would have been Kamala, fair enough. If it would have been somebody else, fair enough. You would have had the strongest candidate. That is not what happened. Instead, they gaslight people saying, well, she was a grassroots candidate. No, Joe Biden was just radically unpopular, and Harris was believed to be this breath of fresh air. But again, when you go around telling people that you're not going to be any different than Joe Biden, and you can't articulate how you would be different, that damages you, that hurts your case, that makes it difficult for people, 80% of which that say we want something different, we don't want the same thing. It makes it difficult for those people to vote for you, let alone go out and stump for you, go out and try to push people to back your campaign, especially around the issue of the Muslim vote. That is a fascinating dynamic to me. Donald Trump using Liz Cheney as a club to beat Kamala Harris over the head for backing the wars that he did, basically saying, how is the Arab community supposed to take you seriously when you're running around with this warmonger whose dad was instrumental in killing millions of them? He has a good point. Problem with that is that Trump himself is backing a genocidal warmonger, as he makes the point about Harris running around the country with a genocidal, or dad anyway, was a genocidal warmonger. Another development that came out yesterday that I guess has been making its waves through has to do with Tulsi Gabbard. Now, some people love Tulsi Gabbard. Some people don't like Tulsi Gabbard. I would argue the Democratic Party didn't necessarily treat her with the most fairness in the world. She was treated poorly, actually. But Gabbard is apparently joining the Republican Party. What? Now, some people could say, okay, well, obviously that was coming up. And some Democrats would argue, Well, she acted like a Republican anyway. I would argue that Tulsi Gabbard ends up going that route less because she's necessarily a Republican, more so because of the way she was treated in the Democratic Party. I mean, think about think about the things that they said about her. She's a Putin puppet. There we are. She's a Putin puppet. She's an Assadist. All of these negative things.
And it is because of my love for our...
This is the clip of her on stage with Donald Trump.
And it is because of my love for our country, and specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people and the party of peace, that I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
People have, over the millions of listeners, some people love Trump and some people hate him, but the thing that Trump...
I'm joining the party of the people, the party of equality, the party that was founded to fight against and end slavery in this country. It is the party of common sense, and the party that is led by a president who has the courage and strength to fight for peace.
Again, this idea that Donald Trump is a peacenik, I don't buy in the least. Let's hear that one more time. I want to hear that one more time. That statement, Tulsi Gabbard is already...
And it is because of my love for our country, and specifically because of the leadership that President Trump has brought to transform the Republican Party and bring it back to the party of the people and the party of peace, that I'm proud to stand here with you today, President Trump, and announce that I'm joining the Republican Party.
So, a party of the people and a party of peace. And you're saying this on stage with a billionaire that is backed by other billionaires. Elon Musk is giving $75 million, or at the very least investing $75 million into Trump. Miriam Adelson's wife, Sheldon Adelson's wife, is investing $100 million into Donald Trump with the idea that he would allow Israel to annex the West Bank. How are you claiming that these billionaires are the party of the people? And yet, that is a mantle that Donald Trump runs with. Democrats get seen as elitists. They are. Donald Trump gets seen as fighting for the common man, or the common man himself. And this was something that was echoed by J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is in an interview. I want you to hear what he says. He's echoing that same thought of man of the people, billionaire, Donald Trump.
Really changed about DC is that he was not beholden to the moneyed interests.
Oh, that's one thing that I also like about Bobby Kennedy. That I've known Bobby for years. Kennedy. Bobby's been a friend of mine for years. I knew him before I thought he was going to do politics.
Yeah, he's a good dude, man. I like Bobby.
He used to hold. That's one thing that I also like about Bobby.
I hate him, but the thing that Trump really changed about DC is that he was not beholden to the moneyed interests.
Oh, that's one thing that I...
Again, billionaire backed by other billionaires. How are they making this argument that Donald Trump is somehow a man of the people? Now, Trump leans into this, right? When Donald Trump went to go to McDonald's and was working at McDonald's, let me see if I can find that clip. Again, it works politically. He's doing it to mock Kamala Harris, effectively saying, she
Do it again.
Knows, but here am I, man of the people, Donald Trump, at McDonald's, serving French fries, serving bags of food, etc., etc. Can you imagine pulling up and Donald Trump is sitting right there, giving you a bag of French fries and Diet Coke? Just amazing. Just utterly amazing. But it works. And that just works he's able to cast himself in these colors of being, I am just a man of the people. I am a blue collar billionaire. I am Donald Trump. I am not beholden to the millionaires. Pay no attention to Elon Musk. Pay no attention to Addison. Pay no attention to the fact that I'm going to give these people control of various aspects of government. Pay no attention to that at all. I am your blue collar billionaire, and I'm really working for you. I think the interesting question for the Democratic Party is, how is he able to take that space? How is he able to take that space? There is not going to be an honest reflection on that. But if you were really looking for a way to get Kamala Harris a win, to really get the Democratic Party some level of cohesion, some level of, what's the word I'm looking for? Balance, some way of bringing back the American public into the fold where they're paying attention, where they want to give you support, where they back you as a coalition of voters and people in a sort of movement. I've been thinking about that heavily. And I think the truth of it is that what the person would need is honesty. I mean, radical transparency and honesty. Meaning, you can't go with this idea that the reason people aren't voting for you is because of a problem with them. They're racist, they're sexist, they're bigoted. If they knew what was good for them, they would really vote for me. Everybody is voting against their self-interest with misinformation. I've had these conversations with Democrats. This is what they think. There is no issue of introspection. There is no looking inward. There's no looking at, why does the public perceive us this way? How does a billionaire take over the mantle of being the blue-collar candidate? For that matter, why are we considered elitists? Why are we not liked by the larger public in a way that Republicans with ghastly ideas are able to either run equal or win in various states? Why were we able to control Congress for 50 years, meaning the House of Representatives were Democrats controlled for 50 years, Republicans only won it twice, then all of a sudden losing it where it goes back and forth and teeter-totters? Why are we now losing Pennsylvania, a state that we were able to hold on to again for like 50 years? There's never introspection into the why. It is always somebody else's fault. And so they want to get the Green Party off the ballot, the party of democracy, want to get the Green Party off the ballot because they don't want Jill Stein or anybody else to be on the ballot. They don't want to give Americans a different option. Or for that matter, they go after people saying it's Jill Stein's fault, it's the Russians' fault, it's the Chinese fault, it's the environmentalists' fault. It's everybody else's fault but their own. My argument is that there needs to be a certain level of honesty in the public eye, by the way, not an autopsy behind the scenes. A come to Jesus moment of acknowledging faults, failures, and a plan to move forward. And part of that plan to move forward is you need to be clearly, tangibly different than the Republican Party. And you need to do government in a way that people can see that government is working in their interests. Everybody can see you've given $270 billion to Ukraine. You do that every other week. Everybody can see you're giving billions of dollars for Israel to commit a genocide and murder and indiscriminate slaughter Palestinians, or for that matter, the Lebanese. They can see that. That's big. That's in their face. They can see you giving money to China. They can see you shaking your fists at the world. What they don't see is you working for their interests. That is a different animal. That is something that they don't perceive and they don't see. I'm saying, A, radical honesty in acknowledging how you failed, how it got to this point, how a blue-collar billionaire is able to take over a party that was considered the party of the people, and to be able to articulate that in clear terms, coherent terms, and to explain how you're going to change, how you're going to be different, and then do that. That is the way out. I don't necessarily know if that way out is available to Kamala Harris in the short term that they have left. I have no belief at all that she's going to do that, countenance that. It seems that she's taken this notion that I do not want to upset the water. I just want to coast to a win. But the problem is you may not be able to coast to a win. And upsetting the water may be the thing that gets you there. This idea that I'm going to wed myself to Joe Biden has been shown to be a failure. It is a folly. And it seems that there needs to be, or at the very least should have been, some level of separation between the two when you, again, consider that 80% of the public believes the country is going in the wrong direction. And when Joe Biden was in the election, Joe Biden was going to get killed in a landslide. So I hope you get my point. And killed politically in a landslide. Being different. Being honest. Having a come to Jesus moment. That would have been far more bang for the buck. What they say, the first part of Alcoholics Anonymous is acknowledging you have a problem. Can't acknowledge. You can't do anything about something that you don't acknowledge, right? If I had to guess, or if I had to give advice, I'd start there. Let's take a quick break. You guys are listening to the Jamarl Thomas Show. We'll be back in a short moment. Welcome back. We're coming to the end of the show. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is Jamarl Thomas Morning Show. We're going to run from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday. Before we leave, let's see if there are any. Deborah Wilson, thank you for that. Much appreciated. Diane Thomas, also much appreciated. I don't see a message on this. Is there a message on this? Okay, I don't see a message on this. But Diane Thomas, thank you very much. Okay, what is going on? Why is it doing that? Oh, okay. But look, guys, I want to thank all of you for joining me. Like I said, this is going to be every day, Monday through Friday. I'm trying to grow this channel, grow the show. Let's see. Your audio is much lower than his and remote guests listening at my... Is it? So there's an audio issue now? Who's loud? I am so happy that Jamarl is contributing, right? No sound. Why is his name not in the description? Well, the name is... Hello, Chris Thomas. Oh, Chris Thomas is even here. Music makes me think of Portal. Music value is much lower. Your mic value is much lower. So wait, you guys are having difficulty hearing me? Your audio is still low. You sound quiet. What? I wonder, is the issue Zoom? I wonder if that's it. Because I had no issue with audio and my settings haven't changed. Yeah, my settings haven't changed. It's the same as it was this morning. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. Now you see why I was asking over the course of the show. Sound is okay if you have a Wi-Fi. The clips are too loud. Okay, I'll deal with the clips. Make sure I'll lower the audio on the clips. Yeah, I gotta be honest, not having an engineer. Okay, so one person says it's slow, the other person says it's high. All right, I guess that's gonna be up to me after the show to figure out how it sounds on my end when I'm getting contradictory information. But look, we are coming to the end. What time is it? It is 9:56. Before we leave, I will give one more spot that I thought was pretty wild. Kamala Harris was on an interview. And in that interview, let's see if I can find it. Maybe I don't have it. All right, yeah. All right, so Kamala Harris was in an interview. And this was an interview she did, I think it was yesterday. And she was asked about Joe Biden's fitness for office. Joe Biden's fitness for office. Now, keep in mind, part of the Democratic argument has been Trump is now unfit. He's too old. He's incoherent. He's losing his mind. And as I keep pointing out, how on earth are you making this particular argument when you were hiding Joe Biden? I mean, keep in mind, this is the same Joe Biden that when he got on the debate stage...
And it is because of my love...
When he got on the debate stage, what Trump said this.
Make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care, making sure that we continue to strengthen our healthcare system, making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID. With dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump?
Well, he's right. He did beat Medicare. He beat it to death.
All right. So, that's the guy that they were saying was fit as a fiddle, has hard sex with his wife every night, that every time Kamala Harris sees him, he's in charge, he's command, he's in control. When he got on that debate stage, that was the guy that we saw. And if you remember, George Clooney said something to the effect that the man that I saw on stage or behind stage when I was giving him a check for $20 million was the same man I saw on that debate stage. We saw video after video of Joe Biden embarrassing himself in America abroad. Maloney had at one point had to go out and escort him back into the fold because he was basically wandering into the wilderness. Like, it is clear as a day. The news media came out and said, well, anything that comes out about Joe Biden is clearly a deep fake. And then after the debate and the whisper campaign started, all hell broke loose. And day after day after day, questions would be asked. Hey, Joe Biden, have you talked to your doctor? Hey, Joe Biden, do you have Parkinson's? Hey, Joe Biden, are you staying in the race? Hey, Joe Biden, this person says that you're hurting the down ticket. Hey, Joe Biden, are you sure you had a mental and cognitive evaluation? Are you sure there's nothing going on, Joe Biden? That goes on for 2 weeks. There's no campaign that can proceed with questions like that. If you remember the Hur memo, for example, people even attacked Robert Hur, the attorney that was looking into Biden in regards to holding the documents at his home. He basically had those presidential documents for years, even though he wasn't president at the time. And Hur's report effectively said he's a nice, well-meaning old man, that the jury would see him as a well-meaning old man, and that basically that is not altogether there with a bad memory, and he didn't believe that a jury would convict. So, Trump, they're going to prosecute for it, or going to try to. Biden, He's out of his mind. He's not cognitively there enough for us to actually prosecute him. So he is going to get a pass on it. This is not people making this stuff up, nor is this deep fakes. This is a man who's running for president and is current president of the United States. When the media reports came out that Joe Biden was going to bed at 4 p.m. Okay, well, that looks bad. The interactions that he was having with his wife, where you got the sense that she was feeding him applesauce. She was leading him around. The sense or that meeting where Joe Biden led the meeting. Nobody elected Joe Biden for anything, and yet she led the meeting. Joe Biden seemed incapable of doing that particular job. I don't believe these people who said that he doesn't have agency. But from the standpoint of being cognitively there in the job of the president where he has nukes, it is a bit concerning. The question that is always and often asked to Kamala Harris, you never saw that? Meaning everything that these other people were seeing and everything that these other people were saying, you didn't see that in Joe Biden, something that everybody else in the American public could see? So it comes across as a bit disingenuous to hit Trump on the notion that he is too old, he's not cognitively there, when you were effectively hiding Joe Biden. She was asked about this.
Make sure that all those things we need to do, child care, elder care,
Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely experienced and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
You never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely.
But that's the reason why you're here. And
just to interrupt for a bit, I'm sorry. That wasn't a bad debate. That was a catastrophic debate. There are bad debates. Trump against Kamala Harris was a bad debate. Joe Obama going against Mitt Romney in the first debate. That was a bad debate. We beat Medicare. It's not a bad debate. That's something else. That is catastrophic. I've never seen a debate that bad, in fact. It was so bad. Keep in mind, debates are important, but they don't usually necessarily define an election. That debate is the thing that forced Joe Biden to get out of the race. Calling it a bad debate is a massive understatement. It's like saying, a nuclear bomb is a bad suntan. It just...
Can you say that you were honest with the American people about what you saw in those moments with President Biden as you were with him again and again, repeatedly in that time?
Of course. Joe Biden is an extremely accomplished, experienced, and capable in every way that anyone would want if they're president.
You never saw anything like what happened at the debate night behind closed doors with him?
It was a bad debate. People have bad debates. He is absolutely...
But that's the reason why you're here, and he's not running for the top of the ticket.
Well, you'd have to ask him if that's the only reason why.
What do you think?
I am running for president of the United States. Joe Biden is not. And my presidency will be about bringing a new generation of leadership to America that is focused on the work that we need to do to invest in the ambitions and aspirations of the American people.
It's a judgment question. That's why I ask. Can the American people trust you in these moments, even when it's maybe uncomfortable for Americans to level with Americans in that way? So that's why I ask. And it sounds like what you're saying is you feel like you never saw anything like that from President Biden.
I have worked with Joe Biden, hours and hours and hours over these 4 years, whether it be in the Situation Room or the Oval Office. Joe Biden is the one who was able to bring NATO together during a crisis where, for the first time in 70 years, Europe saw...
The argument that she never saw the Joe Biden that people saw on a debate night seems completely ludicrous to me. And yet, she's going to make that case. And the interesting part of that question is the Democrats continuously pretending as if Joe Biden got out the race because he was a statesman, that he did it for the best interests of the country, not that he was forced out, which everybody with ears, eyes, and brains knows to be true. That clip is amazing. No, I didn't see anything. I thought he was great. He was great. He was great all the time. Every time I saw him, hours, he was great. He was on it. And then, of course, they're going to say, brought NATO together. He did all of this stuff. I've argued that Joe Biden was the worst president we've ever had in this country. And part of my rationale for that, and maybe the reason that many Democrats in the country don't think that way, is because they don't really pay attention to foreign policy. I mean, we are whistling past the graveyard in multiple conflicts. Israel has nuclear weapons. In the intel report that was recently leaked, one of the things that they talk about in the report is an acknowledgement, A, that Israel has nuclear weapons, and there was concern about whether or not they would utilize those weapons. And look, you have a maniac that is at the helm. What happens if Iran hits Israel in an overwhelming fashion? What happens? Does it create a justification for Israel to use nukes? There's that question. Meaning that is something that is happening now. Israel is a nuclear power and could use nuclear weapons in a contest that it is clearly overmatched. Israel is a country of 9 million people. Iran is 90 million people. They're clearly overmatched. In the other situation, in the war with Ukraine and Russia, if Joe Biden would have acknowledged or allowed weapons to hit Russia, Russia would have went to war with NATO as a direct result. Russia is a nuclear power, and Putin has asked this question himself. What are you going to do? We have nukes. Meaning, if you take this step and we attack one of the European capitals, how are you going to deal with it? There is no answer to that question. And I guess that's my issue. It's not like we're in a situation where there's a win in this. There is no win. The weapons have gotten to the point that everybody loses, especially when we're dealing with countries that are nuclear powers, China, Russia, the US, India, etc. There is no win in the nuclear war. Everyone loses. And these countries seem to be using brinksmanship of that fact that nobody wins and that it is so catastrophic as a political ploy, as something to negotiate around. I'm saying it doesn't have to be that way. We can have a better world. It doesn't have to be this chaos, this havoc, this shaking your fist at all of these countries. It can be different. That is not the politics that we have. And I guess my point here is those major issues that could bring this world to a catastrophic end, at the very least for us as humanity, are ignored, put to the side. So Iran, that was isolated, North Korea, that was isolated, they are no longer isolated. From the standpoint of the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, both of these countries were very close to the United States. These countries are now either in BRICS, joining BRICS, and have a clear relationship with Russia, China, India, etc., etc. South America, Africa, the Middle East have taken an explicit turn in regards to where they're looking. Yeah, you have 14% of the globe that is working in a coordinated effort. I'm including Japan into that, even South Korea into that. But the rest of the world seem to be going in a different direction. This was under Joe Biden's leadership. These wars under Joe Biden's leadership. Genocide under Joe Biden's leadership. Antagonizing China under Joe Biden's leadership. These things are under Joe Biden's leadership. Getting kicked out of Africa under Joe Biden's leadership. The pullout of Afghanistan, again, under Joe Biden's leadership. And so Russia, a country that at the time had like 150,000 troops, has now up to 1 million, is kicking the stuffing out of Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of people dead. That is not a win. That's a negative. Just pointing out. Look, I'm going to end it. I want to thank all of you for joining me today. I will be here Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm going to get you great guests, or at the very least do my damnedest to do so. Michael Tracy is probably angry at me. Dude, I am deeply sorry and deeply apologetic. I was supposed to set him for 9 o'clock. I accidentally set him for 9:30. I put on Shoban at 9 o'clock. That was a mistake. That was just my mistake. When you're doing it all, it's easy to lose things kind of in the mix. So you have my deepest apologies, Michael Tracy. All right, I'm going to end it. The Jamal Thomas Show, Monday through Friday. Oh, what is this? Who is this? Oh, what is your name? What is your name? Moo Portal. Thank you. Much appreciated. Much appreciated. All right, I'm going to end it. Look, if you guys like the content, share it. Give it a like. I am doing my best to grow this show. And it's going to take you guys to do it and help me with it. I'm going to be consistent, and I will be here Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m., giving you context, giving you news, giving you information, and giving you subject matter experts to analyze the events that are taking place on this globe. You guys are listening to the Jamarl Thomas Morning Show, aiming to be the best damn morning show in radio. Have a good one, all. Signing off.